Services of Wayne County. Welcome, everybody. And I wanted to start by congratulating Jacob as our new executive director. First board meeting since it happened. Welcome.
Thanks, Sharon.
And then we're going to go on to the consent calendar, which would be the
Adjustments to the agenda.
adjustments of the agenda. And then on to the consent calendar. Public comments. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. So, do we have any public comments? We do. Chris Cunningham.
You want to come up to the table?
Yeah, you can come up to the table.
Microphone can pick you up.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit hard of hearing. I have a letter to present. I am a member of the Nightingale Health Sanctuary Steering Committee and have written a letter on behalf, but based on my own perceptions. For the past several weeks, I have been attending the meetings of the Nightingale Health Sanctuary Steering Committee as a new member. As you know, in December 2014, the Eugene City Council approved a site on county property for NHS to operate a rest stop for up to 30 unhoused people to live in a self-governing community. We are grateful to the county for providing the site and to the City Council for giving NHS a vote of confidence last December when it first approved the site, and then again when it extended the contract through the middle of August 2015. NHS is in fact two rest stops located side by side on properties situated between Lane County Behavioral Health and the Juvenile Justice Center on the John Searby Youth Campus. Off Martin Luther King Boulevard. Since its inception in early 2015, NHS occupants have resided quietly without any serious complaints from their neighbors. We believe NHS has helped dispel the myth that people without shelter are incapable of living cooperatively within a structured group setting. NHS provides its occupants an opportunity to organize their lives around goals of health, wellness, and recovery. Toward that end, occupants are required to attend site meetings and to contribute time each week to cleaning, maintaining, and operating the premises. Those who break the rules receive corrective action notice in writing, and depending on the nature of the infraction, may be asked to leave the premises, a situation which has occurred 6 times only. The NHS wellness approach is perhaps best witnessed through the daily support the occupants offer each other by listening, providing transportation, and seeking social services for those who require additional assistance. So far, the NHS model has been successful in helping 17 people locate permanent housing. Unfortunately, NHS must move the site by mid-August to accommodate the UO's upcoming football season. The steering committee is currently evaluating potential sites and hopes that it can work with the county to find another temporary site or a more permanent rest stop. Thank you in advance for continuing to help NHS address the needs of the unsheltered in our community. Sincerely, Chris Cunningham.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have any commissioners' response to public comments or remonstrance? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And just very briefly to Ms. Cunningham, thank you very much for being here this morning and pointing out some of the very positive things that have been happening at the rest stops on MLK. You know, it came about on pretty short notice when we were able to find the land for it, and the coalition of folks that helped make it happen. It's just been an amazing thing. If for those among us who haven't visited, or those who may be watching on TV who haven't visited, it really is an example of what can be done to help people move through what should be temporary conditions of homelessness. And you mentioned 17 people have moved into permanent housing. That's an ongoing effort. Now, we're short housing stock. We don't have enough housing stock for people to move into. But as people move through, you mentioned that they help each other with, they support with transportation. access to social services, many things that people trying to live by themselves wouldn't get. And if you go by there, we followed a lot of Dr. Lutke's advice regarding the setting up of the facility. It's sanitary. The food is served in a very welcoming and clean and sanitary fashion, and the people who live in there have a level of dignity that they certainly would not be able to find if not for that facility. So thank you for reporting on that, and it really is a positive part of the services that we offer as a county. As far as the it closes middle of August. That one, we extended the time a couple of months beyond its original closure date, and and it's because of previous contracts that exist regarding the use of the land out there. And so it's, as you mentioned, we're looking to find a suitable replacement, looking to consider what may be the winter options. Should a suitable replacement not be available immediately, what are the winter options for rest stops in the Nightingale Corporation? So thank you very much for bringing that up and giving me an opportunity to say how good of a job that you've done and how well the people are being treated there and how we are moving people through in a dignified fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So do we have any other comments? All right, then we're going to move on to emergency business. We don't have any. No? Nope. Now we're going to move to the consent calendar. So we just have today the approval of the minutes. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Move approval of consent calendar. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes. Okay, and that means we're going to move on to order number 15-07-14-018 in the matter of approving contracts, 15P-0061 and 15-C-0062 construction management general contract services for 6th and Oak Affordable Housing Project. And that's Steve?
Great. I'm going to actually just kick it off with a few words and then turn it over to Steve to talk about the specifics. I think that the project is really exciting for us. It is kind of a unique private and public sector partnership, and I just kind of wanted to communicate to the board that we continue to be in close coordination with Obie and his team. Steve and I actually met with them last week and are in discussions with them about how the commercial areas between our two projects can kind of work together and synergize with each other. So I'm just delighted to be able to work with him and his team. I would also just give Steve some thanks. He's had 2 successful back-to-back low-income housing tax credit applications over the past 2 years, which is a really big feat. And he's done an excellent job of engaging in our real estate development and working with the community. So I'm turning it over to him to talk a little bit more about the selection process for our architect and our students.
Thanks, Jacob. Yes, so just a quick rewind. So back in 2014, the OB Group and HACSA kind of conducted 3 public workshops and got feedback from the public, and then brought some design guidelines to the Lane County Board. And then subsequent to that, we ran a selection process. It started a while back with getting an architect and a construction manager on board. And it was very exciting for both of them. We got a lot of responses, and we got, we had firms from Portland, California, and a lot of regional firms come in. It was very exciting to see how well our local firms competed and actually won. So we went through the evaluation process and selected Burks and Delaney Architects, which is a local firm, and Chambers Construction. And so now we're getting to the time where we need to start getting into the schematic design and doing some early budgeting to figure out if there's going to be any gap financing needed and things like that. And so we're going to need to get them under contract, and so that's why we're here today. So if there's any questions.
Can you make the correction?
Oh, yes. Also in your in the memorandum on page 2, under B analysis, there was under the CMGC contract, it notes that at the construction services costs at $43,908,000. There was 3 zeros added to that. Chambers wouldn't have minded that, but it's actually $43,908, so I want to make sure that's clear and on the record. So.
At yesterday's city council meeting, there's some discussion about this project and about some delay because of site problems with the gas leak or something. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes. So during the level 1 analysis they did on this site, they found what they thought to be 3 underground storage tanks on this site, and they went ahead and already excavated for one of them and found that it actually was just compacted gravel. So they're still, Brian Craner has actually found outside money so that the county or HACSA doesn't have to pay for the work, but that they're going to go look for the other two to, I guess, confirm or deny whether there's underground storage tanks, and if there are, they're just going to take them out and mitigate them. But that is still to come, and it should happen pretty shortly. So.
If things go as planned, when do you expect to start construction?
So if things go as planned, we would apply for tax credits in the 2017 funding cycle, and which would mean construction would start early 2018. That's if we go for the 9% tax credits. We're also running a different model which we could finance through 4% credits with bond financing, which, if that works, it takes a lot more capital to do it that way. But if we were able to find that capital, we could move quicker than that, but it wouldn't be by much, probably. It'd probably be, maybe construction in 2017 if we were able to go that route. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly on the 43.9, I'm presuming you sent a memorandum to the administration to make sure that this is changed on the memo that, when we click view items, that memo comes up. And if it's not changed now, then posterity will think it's still 43 million.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes, we'll make sure that it's...
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move approval of Order 15-07-14-01H in the matter of approving contracts for architectural services and construction management and general contractor services for the 6th and 1st affordable housing project with the amendment striking $43 million and replaced with $43,908.
You second? Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay, so then we're going to go on to Order 15-07-14-02H in the matter of designated authorized representatives for execution of documents relating to Bascom Village Phase 2 Affordable Housing Development. And that is back to Steve again.
So we are moving quickly to closing Bascom financing. It's a really big deal, as you all know from other public works projects that you approve. But it's roughly a $9 million plus financial transaction. Steve's been doing an excellent job working with our attorney and kind of moving this towards close. The closing date's moving around, and just in the spirit of transparency, I'm going to Alaska with my dad to go fishing. So we need to make sure that Valerie can sign the legal documents necessary should I not be in town. So that's what this is.
Okay, so I guess I'll follow up with a little more detail on that. So the board previously, in March, the board authorized Larry and Jacob to sign all documents for Bascom Village Phase 2, and so this is basically amending that to include Valerie also, and or taking out Larry since he's retired and adding Valerie. And yeah, and I guess the one thing, so we're looking at hoping right now in early August construction start, and we got the land has been transferred from the city as of last week to HACSA, so that's great news, and so we should be breaking ground shortly. So.
Commissioner Fry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm noticing in the motion that it lists Jacob Fox and Valerie Warner. I just wanted to point out, Jacob, I got a memo from you that Valerie was appointed as the Deputy Director on July 1st of this year. Best congratulations along to Valerie. Great choice.
Thank you. Markey?
So, question I have, at one point, and I have not really followed this that closely, but at one point the neighbors there where Baskin Village, they had retained an attorney to try to fight the project. Has that since been taken care of?
That has. So they're no longer fighting the project.
Okay.
We actually came to the Northeast Neighbors meeting, the last Northeast Neighbors meeting they had, and did a mini presentation with the architect and construction manager. It's the same one that's working Bascom Phase 1, so a lot of the neighbors were there, have already talked to them, visited with them, and seemed generally in favor of, and a few had mentioned that they were, it was nice to see local construction workers around, and that they'd been real cognizant about neighborhood traffic and that kind of thing. So it's been feeling good.
Thank you.
And I was at that meeting, and it was remarkable the change of face that many of those neighbors had shown from the early days when I met with them first at Churchill High School.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Not Churchill, at Sheldon High School.
Are there any other comments? All right.
Madam Chair, I'd move approval of Order 15-7-14-028 in the matter of designating authorized representatives for execution of documents relating to the Baskin Village project.
Do you have a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. Now we're going to go on to a report, which is a review of the HACSA financial statement and audit reports for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2014, with Valerie Warner.
So I'll kind of tee this up and just want to congratulate Valerie on her promotion to Deputy Director. And Valerie and I were hired about the same time. As you all know, I have a long history in affordable housing, and Valerie has a long history in finance. She's worked with Commissioner Lyken when he was at the City of Springfield. And one of the things that's tough at HACSA is attracting people that have the depth of talent we need to move the organization forward. When we get, there are occasions when we get lucky when people are willing to take major pay cuts or work for us for a lot less than they could make in other local jurisdictions in the private sector, and I would put Valerie in that category. She came in behind a finance director who had left a lot of challenges for us to face, and you all kind of worked through that with us through our 2013 audit. And our finances and our oversight mechanisms are much stronger now, and I think you'll see that as Valerie explains the 2014 audit. So again, we're just really grateful to have her in the role of Deputy Director.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I want to start off by pointing out that we are here on July 14th talking about financial data that is 9 months old. Seems a little long to me, but last year it was 11 months after the end of the fiscal year. So we're on a good trend, and I think next year I could even see you sooner than July. Although the HUD deadline was June 30th, and we did meet the HUD deadline without an extension. The timely completion of this report would not have been possible without the efforts of everyone in the finance department, but also program managers throughout the agency who cooperated with the auditors, providing documentation, explanations, and basically had their paperwork in order so the transactions of the year were clearly, completely, and correctly documented, and the auditors were able to move quickly through their program examinations. This was the second year in our audit contract with the CPA firm of Bjorklund and Montplaisir. Their office is in Portland. Bjorklund and Montplaisir were first contracted to audit HACSA's tax credit properties, and they continue in that role as well. In case you're curious, the price tag on this year's audit was $35,000 for the HACSA audit. It's very common in my experience for the auditors to be making the presentation of the financials to the governing body, and actually they are working for you, the governing body. And it was simply a HACSA kind of precedent or past practice that the staff made this presentation, but Jacob and I have talked about in the future, we will have the auditors here to report to you on the financials. So I've heard a lot of these auditor reports, and I'm going to try to do what they usually do. So I'm going to just tell you about some of the things that appear in the report. Pages 11 through 14 of the report contain the basic financial statements. Many people would call this the balance sheet, the income statement, and the cash flow statement. And if you look at those statements, you'll see that there are two columns. One is labeled primary government, and one is labeled discretely presented component units. The discretely presented component units comprise the 8 tax credit properties. HACSA is responsible for them in an oversight way, and we also are responsible fiscally, and therefore those entities must be reported in our financials as discretely presented component units. The primary government column comprises all of HACSA's other activities, public housing, Section 8, all of the other buildings that we run and programs that we do. In case you're curious about those discretely presented component unit properties on a property-by-property basis, pages 34 through 37 provide building by building the operating results of those projects. Pages 4 through 10 are the management discussion and analysis section of this report. That is where I try to write in plain English the high points of the report for a non-finance reader. The management discussion and analysis pertains only to the primary government and doesn't include any comments about the discretely presented units. You may notice the term blended component unit appearing in this report as well. The blended component units are for 3 housing projects that were tax credit properties, and they have matured, so to speak, where the other partner has stepped out and HACSA is solely in control of the units. And the other blended component unit is HACSA's nonprofit arm. It's called Housing Plus, and there's some activity being passed through Housing Plus. The notes to the financial statements appear on pages 15 through 38. These notes are very closely prescribed by accounting standards, and they are intended to define and clarify the line items that appear in the basic financial statements. For example, they would tell you that we depreciate buildings over 40 years and that we report investments at lower of cost or market, and such interesting information. The supplementary information on pages 39 through 44 is required by HUD. It's sort of a program-by-program breakdown of the entire entity, but in this section, some columns do represent more than one project. And so for this year, we added some additional schedules on pages 45 through 52. So unlike last year, you can now look in this financial statement and see the individual results of every single program and project that HACSA is doing. Pages 54 through 69 contain the required elements of the single audit report. You probably know that a single audit is a function that allows an entity receiving many different government grants to have one audit instead of many different audits from all the different grantor agencies. So HACSA's grants are listed on pages 64 and 65. We get quite a few. And I'm really thrilled to report that unlike last year, we have no findings on this year's single audits. And if I forgot to say it, we also, of course, have an unqualified or unmodified opinion on the financial statements as a whole. So 2 small items that I want to call out in terms of the fiscal information in the audit. Our unrestricted net position increased by approximately $1 million in this fiscal year to $12.5 million. Unrestricted net position turns out to be a very important number, and as we were qualifying for the financing on the Bascom deal, I spent a lot of time with the bank explaining that number, and it really is quite a nice fiscal indicator. The other thing I wanted to say is days cash. You may have heard this expression from other auditors in your experience. So days cash is approximately 30. That means that if something ridiculous were to happen and we didn't get any revenue in from any of our regular revenue sources, we do have enough cash on hand, unrestricted, to pay our operating expenses for 30 days. Another healthy fiscal indicator. So that's really all I feel like I need to tell you. I'm very proud of this year's report. I hope you take the time to take a look at it, and I'll end my comments and take your questions.
Excuse me. Thank you, Valerie, very much. Are there any comments or questions? No?
I think the silence, when I first got on this board, I was put off a couple of times by the silence, but then I got what it meant. What it means is we understand and we so much trust you. So I'm pretty sure that's what the dead silence is from. Because having HACSA be well-run and financially well-regulated is incredibly important, because there are hundreds of I'll just say the obvious, very financially vulnerable people, and if the project goes under, something happens, there are some people in huge trouble. So
Thank you.
Valerie, I just want to say thank you. You mentioned it earlier, and I for one, appreciate it after someone who's read a lot of audits over the years. Thank you for putting it in plain English. And I must tell you, it's because if you sit down with the auditors of like a CPA firm, if you didn't have that plain English, and even all of the audits I've been through over the years, it still can be very challenging to pick up just the language itself with the accountants. So thank you very much. I
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Regarding the possibility that auditors would come in to present the audit, haven't there been some changes in the requirements that Congress put on auditors to interview the principal members of the governing board in preparation for the audit or in conclusion of the audit? Have there been some changes in that?
Commissioner, I don't know the answer to that. I know that at the beginning of the audit, questionnaires were distributed to Larry and to Jacob and to myself and to other department directors at HACSA, and that's what you're talking about. They're sort of fraud awareness kind of questionnaires.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the governing body members, if there's any new audit standards that require the governing body, but I can find out about that.
Perhaps when they present, they could point that out.
Sure.
That there are or aren't.
Yeah, in terms of the board, I can tell you that they review all the board meeting minutes for the year, and I think, that's the extent of it as far as I know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Burke?
Hugh, so much for the silence. Just very quickly, congratulations on your appointment to the position as deputy and the work that went into that. Jacob mentioned ever so briefly the difference between today and 2013 when I first started looking in depth at HACSA's financials, and it's not the same statement. I mean, it's remarkable the distance that we've traveled in the time that you both came on board. It's a real boost to the folks that Hugh mentioned, the people who are very vulnerable in our community who rely on the services that you provide. One quick comment, though. Looking at page 15, we're talking about Jacob's Lane, the complex there. It's in the documents. It's JACOB''S, as if it's Jacob's Lane. There's no apostrophe there. I think it's named after a family called the Jacobs family.
Wow, I missed that one.
That lane doesn't actually belong to Jacob, I don't.
You caught me.
Unless that 43 million. No, never mind.
Good eye.
Say that's fine.
Yeah, I was like...
So, it notes that there was a total net operating loss of $800,000 plus, which was down from $1 million the year before. Yet the net unrestricted net position increased over that time. Can you just I assume part of that is because part of the operating cost is debt payment, so we actually we lost some liabilities in debt and gained some asset so it's kind of, when you see that we're operating at a loss, it's, how do we end up with a gain in our total assets is kind of, can you walk
It's
us
the
through?
depreciation expense is included in operating loss,
Yeah.
and depreciation expense, of course, is not a cash
It's a paper,
expense.
yeah.
But the total net position, there's so much going into that. It's just not, it's not a simple question or a simple analysis. The gain in net position was spread over our programs, and all of the programs, if you look at them, have depreciation expense in there, so you kind of have to take each one apart. It was not well, $1 million is a big increase in net position. I don't have a good answer for you. I don't have a good, simple answer for you on that.
Okay, but the fact that the operating loss includes depreciation when you're talking about fixed assets in the $40 million range, $800,000 in depreciation on $40 million is not unheard of, so.
Well, another kind of simple answer would be that we do get this capital infusion from HUD on the public housing every year. It's about $1 million. So if everything else remained equal, that alone would put us $1 million up.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
There's no action requested on this info only.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to order number 150714-03H in the matter of approving the submission of the annual agency plan for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2015.
Great. So I'll keep this as short as I can. Essentially, this is a HUD-required approval, and you do it every year. On every fifth year, you also approve what's called the 5-year plan, and then we come back in subsequent years and bring you an annual plan. The one thing I would say about this plan is that this plan goes before our resident advisory board. That is a required board by HUD. Both Shar and Hugh are on that committee, along with other folks that are on our programs. And I would just point out that Shar and Hugh's leadership is really, really important with that group, and then obviously with the HACSA board as well. I attended a retreat last week with Shar and Hugh that they led, and what's striking to me is that we have a group of residents that really care about what we do, and they want to give us input on policy changes that we're going to be considering over time. So I would say that that group will become more active, and Valerie and myself and the division directors are going to spend more time with that group. So that group did endorse this plan, and we went through a more detailed list of capital projects that we plan over the coming 5 years. So we just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention.
Great. Any comments? Resolution?
Madam Chair, I move approval of order 15-07-14-03H in the matter of approving the submission of the annual agency plan for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2015.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. So then we're going to move on to another report, the semi-annual implementation review of the 5-year strategic plan.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to mention before I get into a few specifics was that in a meeting I had recently with Shar and Faye, I was talking about some of the real estate kind of opportunities and challenges, and also the fact that we're coming to the end of our 5-year strategic plan at the end of this year. And they both thought a work session would be a good investment of time at some point in the next couple months. And so I want to let you know that I think that is a really good idea. There are some real estate issues that I think you need to spend some time giving us some advice on, and even our real estate development pipeline has a lot of projects in it, and I think we need to talk through those. And we can also use that same work session to kind of kick off kind of what the strategic plan process will look like, and I'd be able to get your input on some strategic ideas you have about where we can go over the next 5 years. So what's before you today is our semi-annual report. One of the things that Larry did brilliantly with your support was created a strategic plan that had really specific goals and really specific associated deadlines. We don't know many public entities that have a strategic plan that's this concrete, so we're proud of it, and I would really credit Larry and this board for putting it together. So this strategic plan is kind of in 4 goal areas, and I'll just kind of hit the highlights in each goal area. The first goal area is page 1 through 4, and it captures our work in real estate development and our affordable housing advocacy work in our community. So the first thing I would just draw your attention to is Turtle Creek. That's on page 1. We were going to do some affordable home ownership houses at this property. It's 20 lots. And the financial feasibility of building these homes doesn't seem to work, basically. So we're working with the city of Eugene, which is who we have the property from, and the plan is to sell the units to home builders that would purchase them and build homes on them. So I just wanted to let you know we've looked at every possible way to get these homes to pencil, and it just doesn't seem possible. So that's what I'd put on your radar on that front. The next thing I'd put on your radar is just the Hope Loop partnership we have with the University of Oregon. So we have 9 lots that we're working in partnership with the University of Oregon. These are students that design the units, and then these are architecture students primarily, and they actually build the units, and then they're sold to lower income households in our community. So it is a unique partnership, and they just completed their second home, and it looks terrific. So then I'd just move to page 2. And at the top, there's the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. So this is the project that we received approval from HUD, where we would sell 112 single-family homes in duplexes, and then we would bring those subsidies back into new construction. The proceeds from those sales will also be needed to fix up our existing portfolio, and this is an area that I'd go in much more detail in a work session with you all. But I do want you to know that we are actively working with HUD, and this is a real project that's going to take a lot of our time and attention over the coming years. I mentioned Bascom Phase 2. We're just delighted that we're about to close in the coming weeks. And then the next one I'd point out is on page 3, which is the Housing First project. So this is really a goal of the Poverty and Homelessness Board to go through a due diligence process to decide whether our community would benefit from a project like this. For me, there's a real cost-benefit analysis that comes with this, because this building would target folks that are chronically homeless, that are in and out of hospitals, and that are in and out of jail, so very expensive folks in our community that would be better served in a building that surrounded them with supportive services and a healthy living environment. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to talk about that in the future. So then I'm moving into goal area number 2, which is our effort to obtain funding sources that will help primarily our resident services. And what this highlights on the bottom of page 4 is these EHA funds. I did want you to know that these EHA funds are used in partnership with our VASH program to serve veterans. So these funds are actually being used to pay deposits and fees for veterans, and it's been something that we've worked in partnership with Lane County on. So these funds come through Lane County and just really shows this community's commitment to serving veterans, and it's really effective. So I'm going to move into goal area 3, and it's a long goal area, and I'm not going to touch on a lot of things here, but this goal area is pages 5 through 12, and it's really focused on internal improvements we're making at the organization. Just to give you an example, and pick on Larry a little bit because he won't care. Larry was not a big technology person, so HACSA has kind of a technology deficit that we're working to fill. So that's an area of time and money that we're investing in just to bring HACSA kind of up into current technology. So we all know that the succession plan was a success. It not only included me moving in behind Larry, but it included Valerie moving in behind me. And then we also have some division directors that are retiring in the coming year, so we're working on succession plans for those individuals as well. At the bottom of page 5, I've talked before about our breakthrough teams. So these are teams that we organize to take on big challenges within the organization. Our Section 8 lease rate is a perfect example. Our lease rate dropped into the low 90s when Congress sequestered funds, and we had a very difficult time to get it back to 100%. If we were not successful to get it back to 100%, the delta between 100% and 90% is roughly $1 million. So that would have been $1 million that our community could have lost permanently that helped low-income people in our community. So it was an internal team that was exceptionally effective, and they really solved a big problem for us. The next thing I'll mention is on page 6, and we used to have a development group, an asset management, and we actually didn't have an asset management group, and then we had a separate capital projects team. We've combined those under the leadership of Steve Oakes so that our development, asset management, and capital projects are working in close coordination with each other. The work they do is very interrelated. And then the other thing I mentioned before was VASH, and on page 10 at the bottom, we just talked about the community effort that's being put into utilizing both our resources and other resources in the community. The VASH vouchers are being aggressively leased up, and that's a big help for the veterans in our community. So I'm going to move into the self-sufficiency section. That's goal 4, and that's page 12 through 15, and just highlight 2 things for you. First is that we have a family self-sufficiency team that you all have heard of, but we need to deliver to you, I think, some better metrics around the success that this program is having. It's having a dramatic positive impact in the lives of low-income people by increasing their self-sufficiency and their income. And we've had a large number of our residents become homeowners, which really contributes to the tax base and allows us to use our subsidies to serve other folks. So I want to make sure that you all get better communication about the success that that program is having. The last thing I want to touch on briefly is we are actively partnering with community organizations. St. Vincent in Bascom is a perfect example of a very good, powerful partnership. We're also in discussions with Cornerstone about a potential partnership with them where we have a more synergistic relationship. Maybe they don't do housing development in the future. Maybe they focus more on resident services, and maybe we focus more on development in partnership with them. So I'll be briefing all of you in the coming weeks just a little bit more about how that partnership could happen. And I would say also across the nation, housing authorities and nonprofits are forming these kinds of partnerships, and it's really about building capacity and increasing mission impact, and I'm looking forward to talking about that more with you individually and then in our work session. So that concludes my highlights of the semi-annual strategic plan report, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Have any questions? I have.
Thank you. I just have one. So we adopted the 5-year plan in which year was that? Was it back in
last year?
Last year.
Oh, I'm sorry. This 5-year plan. This was in 2010, and so it expires December 31st of 2015.
Right. So we're almost to the end of the 5-year period. Mm-hmm. In goal 1, we were trying to add enough housing for 300 additional residents. Do you know where we are in total on that goal? I mean, you've got a bunch of different pieces here, but from 2010 to today, do you know what our net increase in housing available is?
I do not know off the top of my head, but that's not that's a number I can get quickly and email you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben Fair. And, I think it's safe to say that you've probably exceeded that. We're looking at the DASH use. I mean, we're close to 100% of the use of DASH availability, and that goes along with Operation 365, housing the unhoused veterans. And so far, we've housed 200 unhoused veterans alone. since November of last year. So I think 300, when you do the research on that and present us with the numbers, we'll probably smile and say, wow.
Yeah, I think it's going to be far past 300. That's why I wanted to see the number. I'm just thinking of all the complexes that have opened over the last 5 years.
There have been Bascom Village, and then we have the 14 Cove coming up very quickly. And as I said, with the VASH housing, more VASH has become available to us.
And we have eliminated a few of the distributed housing over those years too for cost savings. So it's just what's the net.
Yeah, we'll definitely work on that number and make sure.
Any other questions or comments? I just have one question for you, Jacob, and I put you on the spot here. How many people have graduated out of the family self-sufficiency maybe in the last few years?
I actually don't know that number off the top of my head.
Sorry, put you
that's
right
okay.
there on the spot.
No, that's okay. I need to bring a cheat sheet. So yeah, it's an impressive number, and so when I get the number on the net increase in units, I'll send the self-sufficiency graduate number as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right, so then we're going to move on. We don't have an executive session. Do we have any other business?
Madam Chair, I wanted to report, first of all, I would like to thank you, our legal counsel, Stephen Dingle and Jacob, report to the board that at the last meeting we were charged as chair and vice chair to engage in contract negotiations with Jacob to get him formalized as the director. That's been accomplished. I wanted to let folks know that it was accomplished with agreement one step below what the current pay range allowed, and also in reviewing the comparables, we probably will be tackling the fact that this position is considerably under market. So I want to thank Jacob for taking the position under market and actually a step below, and he's committed to bringing information to us so that we can tackle that salary range in the future. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. There's no further business, then we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Legislative work.
And I'm going to note for folks, we have public comment periods today. There's one for this joint meeting and one for the regular meeting later. I'm going to take all the public comment up front so that people don't have to wait through all of our Board of Health meeting to get to their public comment. So if you're signed up for public comment, I'm going to take all public comment up front. And then there is also a public hearing on the tobacco ordinance separately. So, if you've signed up for the wrong thing, don't worry about it. We'll get you straight. We'll make sure you get moved to the correct thing. But and I'll ask people if they forgot to sign up. So don't feel like don't panic. We'll get everybody an opportunity to speak here. And just for the board's sake, note that we're going to take executive session after our first two items this afternoon. The executive session will be in the afternoon. So with that, any other adjustments to agenda to the Board of Health this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. And this is the general public comment for both the Board of Health and the Board of Commissioners. And the first person I have signed up to speak is Paul Biondi. And if you'll come up to the mic, state your name and the city you're from for the record. And after Paul, we have Ellen Otani.
Thank you. Yes, we ran out of Paul Biondi from Lane County, Eugene, Paulbiondi. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for the service you do for our community. I was just even saying that waking up early and getting in here is just an amazing thing to me, that you guys are able to do that. And we're doing our nonprofit event for the Musicians Emergency Medical Association this year. This is our major fundraiser. It's at Lavelle's Winery. And basically, the commissioners each year have been very supportive of this. And last year I wasn't able to make it in to talk about it because I was going through health issues. I want to thank our community for helping me get through these health issues. If it wasn't for you and our community, I probably wouldn't be here. So I'm very, very grateful. And with that said, we're having a very nice party on Saturday, and a party with wine, which seems to work well for folks. It's at Lavelle Vineyards, and we have Concrete Love Seat. We have Martin Gershowitz, who used to be with the Animals and also Iron Butterfly. And then I have a group performing, and also we have Candy Apple Blue. And we have great supporters of this, KVAL, KRVM, Aqua Serene, Guarantee RV, and many others. And I just would love to see any of you stop up if you can. It's from the hours of 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And again, I can't thank you enough as great gentlemen of our community for all the hard work you do for us, representing us, that it's hard for us to speak and get things done. And knowing that you're out there doing this for us just blows me away. And then I'm very grateful. And I hope if you can, make a visit out to Lavelle's on Saturday and spend some time with us, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Otani, followed by Pat Hoover.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Otani from the Ferry Street Bridge area of Eugene, so I'm in Mr. Farr's district. I would like to discuss with you this morning the importance of the Howard Beaufort Recreation Area Habitat Management Plan as a tool for making decisions about the highest and best use of the North Bottomlands, a charge I heard you give to the Lane County Parks at the September 17th, 2013 Commissioners meeting. The Habitat Plan, under development since 2008, with a grant from the Department of Fish and Wildlife with a panel of outside experts, was presented to the Parks Advisory Committee in summary form, ready to be finalized and implemented December 20th of 2010. The full document has not yet to be seen. Mr. Russell promised that it would be funded in calendar 2015 and completed by December, but now the large event task force's term has been extended, and the Habitat Management Plan's estimated date of completion has been pushed back to 2016, June of 2016. The only document available for HBRA that considers the North Bottomlands' place in the Willamette confluence and the fact that it includes rare wetland prairie has been denied to the LETF, the general public, and you, the commissioners, for going on 5 years. And as an option, surveys really don't cut it. I feel the Lane County Parks mailed survey was biased. It lumped together the North Bottomlands with a nonprofit's leasehold where the county can't even run its own events, but which has the only potable water and toilets. Instead of the more objective 7-page Lane County summary of the OSU's SCORP demand analysis that the Large Event Task Force has actually been using, Mr. Russell posted what I would consider a ringer, the 145-page unmanageable statewide equivalent. So I actually included in your packet the nice little 7 pages that are much more convenient to use and actually refer to Lane County. But even under the best of circumstances, surveys only ask people's personal opinions. The Large Event Task Force has been expected to make decisions with no objective, site-based data. So I would ask that you defer making any irrevocable decisions about what should happen to North Bottomlands until you and the public examine the only document developed for HBRA that may let the land speak for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Pat Hoover, followed by Sue Cox.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. You know me as the chairwoman of the Parks Advisory Committee. I'm also a parks activist and been following and attending all the large event task force meetings. So I have a couple issues here that I'd like to bring to your attention. First of all, it's become very clear through an entire year of the meeting of the large event task force, and since really August of 2013, there's been a huge erosion of trust from the public of Lane County Parks, and that's got to be rebuilt as best as we can. That's a big deficit right now. The other thing is, it's clear that for scheduling and putting large events on the calendar, and also events that are smaller than 1,000 people, really all the events that are staged at Lane County Parks, there is no oversight, there's no review committee, there are no checks and balances on parks doing those schedulings. And that will come up with the materials that you will be getting from the large event task force. They have realized this fact too. We need some oversight, we need some stakeholders to help make these selections so that we get good selections of what's being held in the parks. So that will be coming to you when you get that report. Second thing, the PAC last night at our PAC meeting chose to release the Park and Open Space Master Plan document to the public before we were finished with our review. We have 2 more chapters to review. They're very important chapters. It's taking us a while because this is a long, big, huge, fat document, and it needs a lot of work. And so we have said we need the public to weigh in on this. So we've released it. Parks will be giving out notice and starting their public meetings. It will go on the internet. So I encourage you, when that happens, which will be soon, to have your constituencies be sure and weigh in on that. Goal 1 of the Rural Comprehensive Plan is community participation, and we really need the community to weigh in. Right now, we've got 7 PAC, a few TAC members, the technical committee, and the 14 LETF. We've got about 25 people putting together this 20-year master plan for how parks will go forward. So we don't want that all on us. We really want that public input. So that's going to happen a little sooner than Parks thought, because the PAC released that document for the first draft, and it'll be coming out soon. So anything that you also can do to help us with that public input, we would love. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Sue Cox, followed by Tracy Jocelyn.
Yes, my name is Sue Cox, and I am Lane County, and I'm from Lowell. I'm one of those little people out there, and we come in every once in a while. I'm going to reiterate what Paul Biondi had mentioned earlier. There's a benefit concert at Lavelle's Vineyards for the Musicians Emergency Medical Association, again to be held this weekend. And what I wanted to bring up with this is that this is part of Lane County. We have a tourism board or a tourism economy, and one of the things that we have in this tourism economy is our music. We have the Bach Festival that comes in, and we've just finished our wonderful Oregon Country Fair. And this is an integral part of where we are as both a county and really is what the state has got to offer too. What Musicians Emergency Medical Association does is make sure that our musicians are financially healthy, and when something comes up, with whatever happens, if you have a musician that's a guitarist that breaks an arm, he might be off for a couple of months. We've got to make sure that his rent is paid. Often these musicians are working at a very low income level, and those types of situations come up, and we try to support them. And this is our fundraiser that we do every year. We've been lucky to integrate our music with the other economy in Lane County, which is our vineyards, and Lavelle's have been very welcoming to us for the third year, and we want to thank them also for doing that. We also have another connection that I think that could enhance a little bit of our tourism. We are lucky this year that we have got a gentleman, Martin Gershwitz, is going to be performing. He's up from Los Angeles. We got lucky that he was he was able to perform for us. He took his time off and he's going to give this to us. This is where he supports what we're doing and also what the musicians represent. The first time there's a natural, disaster any place, either locally or, any place in the world, the musicians are the first to step up and come in and say, what can we do to help? They'll put on their own fundraisers, tsunamis, earthquakes, any kind of human disasters, the musicians are always there first. And Mr. Gershwitz is one of the ones that has stepped up to that. Now, if some of us that have maybe not of age group that know who Martin Gershwitz is, he was with the Animals. He played with them. He's a keyboardist. He's also a German immigrant, so he was trained as a classical German pianist, and he brings to this concert not only his history with Eric Burden and the Animals in that tradition, but also with Iron Butterfly. And as Paul was kind enough to give me some of the names, everybody knows In-Gadda-Da-Vida, and he does this with gets everybody up dancing. So if you do anything, come out and listen to Martin Gershwitz do In-Gadda-Da-Vida. He also the songs are Ticket to Ride. All of these things, for a certain age group, will remember who he is. Anyhow, anything you want. When he was with the Animals, the songs that you might remember is the iconic, House of the Rising Sun. So again, we're going to introduce a certain age group's music to maybe a younger generation, and like to invite everybody out to Lavelle's on July 18th to what we call a survivor's party. I don't care what you're surviving, but there's a lot of people out there that have gone through a lot, and we want to celebrate that you survived. And I thank you very much for your time. Again, July 18th, Lavelle's Vineyard, benefit for Musicians Emergency Medical. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Tracy Jocelyn.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Jocelyn. I've lived in Eugene for 30 years. I'm a huge music fan. I'm glad to see Paul Biondi's feeling all better. He often steps up for any band to liven it up and share his talents. And kind of in the spirit of the Musicians Fund, kind of goes with low income, because people do what their hearts believe in. Maybe it doesn't always bring in the money. And he's not used to mornings, because music happens till 2 a.m. I'm here to discuss the Nightingale Health Sanctuary. We just happened to step on a housing subcommittee meeting. So thank you for all your work and care and concern of helping people to be able to have a good life. And thank you so much for the opportunity for us to have a Nightingale Health Sanctuary rest stop. We're going to start shuffling out of there August 14th, and it's going to be looking like it did before we got there by August 29th. We've already started moving some platforms out of the way and buy some grass seed and put it all back, and the rest stop was a success. 17 people found housing, and we just have confidence about August 14th. About half the crew is going to stay together for safety and figure out what we're going to do, and we're clever people and we're survivors, so any assistance from anybody, state lands, county lands, school board, we just need a little place to be safe and continue our progress. So there was a
Breaking Barriers to Housing workshop put on by Diane Avery of the county. And in preparation for it, we did a worksheet. And one story is a young man who's came into camp and said, well, maybe everybody doesn't want housing. Maybe we like living this way. Maybe we don't need to be told what to do. And then we fill out this worksheet, and we're just totally getting prepped for our workshop. And he says, I mean, I can get health care because my teeth really freak me out. So he went in there, he got OHP, he found out he could get help with his teeth, and he's already filling out job applications. So, mister, maybe we like it this way, which some people do or say they do, is now taking baby steps towards, hate to say it, no, I'm not going to say a participating member of society, but somebody who's dealing with his own personal issues and taking one step at a time to get through the financial imbalances of maybe not making the best decisions your whole life towards that goal. Is that understandable? Again, thank you so much for your assistance and your willingness to let us try the Rest Stop. We're going to pack away our stuff. It's going to be a Rest Stop kit. We got the paperwork lined out with the help of Alicia and Dr. Ludke, and we did really great, and you guys are doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's everyone I have signed up to speak for public comment. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak for public comment versus the public hearing on the ordinance? Seeing none, then we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comment and or other issues and remonstrance. Any comments from the board? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bozovich. We have a long meeting, so I'll keep this very, very short. I just wanted to say thank you, Paul Biondi, for being here today, and thank you, Sue Cox, for being here today, for speaking about this. It's pretty exciting. You know, my dad's from Newcastle. You know, the significance of Newcastle, that's where the animals came from. So when I was growing up in the 60s, man, the keyboards, the animals were one of the first ones to really have the lyrical, lilting keyboards, and this is the guy that did it right here. So it's not just the House of the Rising Sun, you know, it's a Sky Pilot, it's a whole works. So pretty exciting. If people love the animals, and you all should love the animals, and if people love Iron Butterfly, and most of you should love Iron Butterfly, it's going to be a great place to be. Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Mr. Sorensen.
Well, he also played with Iron Butterfly, who played McCourt in 1971. And no, Paul, I don't have my ticket stub.
Commissioner Lyken.
Well, on that note, no, I want to say thank you very much. I think what this benefits is really fantastic, and so Paul, really appreciate you coming to speak. As a longtime musician myself, as Paul well knows, in fact, one of these days we're going to jam together. I know. I've had the opportunity to jam with Riffle in the past, and with Shelley's Music Box, and here locally, and so I really appreciate it. I'm a little bit younger. And but I did grow up on when I first grew up. I started listening to classical music is how I got my interest, and then I listened to this band called Led Zeppelin, and that changed my life forever. And but speaking of that, and I think what you're talking about is really the whole issue of, because what people see on TV or what others of these bands that have gone on to sell all these platinum albums, the reality is 90% of the musicians are local musicians that play here locally for us. And really, I think that when you put together these type of benefits like this is fantastic, because this is a great music scene here, and it's something that I think we should continue to promote. So I really appreciate that, and I'm going to do what I can to get out there and listen. So thank you very much for this. And but again, I think it's what it's benefiting musicians. Emergency Medical Association. It's a great benefit. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll just mention that I'm somewhere between these two commissioners. So I remember my next older brother's first couple albums was Iron Butterfly and Blue Cheer. So that kind of, if you remember their version of Summertime Blues. And believe it or not, I was actually a musician too. But as I was going through school, I decided engineering actually paid a little better than staying in music. And I really wasn't a very good musician. So I would have been really struggling. So with that, we'll move on to our next item, which is Health and Human Services, and it's a public hearing and second reading of Ordinance 1505 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to address tobacco sale regulation, issues relating to discounting pricing, proximity of sales to locations serving children, and fees and penalties. And we have Alicia Hayes and Aaron Gaffney. And if you guys want to start, and then we'll go to the public hearing, or you want us to go straight to the public hearing here?
We're fine with whatever works for you. We could do our presentation first and then move on to
Why don't we do the presentation first in case the folks commenting want to comment on that? So.
Okay, perfect. So we're here today for the second reading, and Karen has a presentation for you, and then public comment and open for a conversation.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. We do have a little bit of a presentation just to be able to give the viewing public and the audience a sense of how we got where we are and what's in front of you today. I'd like to start with just a little bit of background. 2 years ago, as you know, the county worked with Peace Health, the Trillium, and United Way to complete our first community health improvement plan. We talk about that as the CHIP, and that CHIP is really the roadmap to better health that this community has collaboratively developed, was approved by the Board of Commissioners, as well as the other bodies in the summer of 2013. And then based on that data and local input, the CHIP identified 5 priorities to improve health in the community, and one of those was to reduce tobacco use. In past presentations, we've reviewed the health impacts related to tobacco, and I won't go through all of that today in the interest of time, but I would remind the public that tobacco use remains at the top of the list of preventable causes of death. And the board has discussed in several sessions your desire to address those issues first among the youth population, knowing that prevention and early intervention through these policies provides a cost-effective way to address this problem before it really takes root and causes the devastating health and economic consequences that we know are a result of tobacco use. And we've said on several meetings of the Board of Health that really once someone is addicted, it's so difficult to quit. And we know that most people who end up addicted started using tobacco when they were underage. So after a number of discussions, tobacco retail licensing was identified as a priority for county work. And based on the data, that was based on data from other communities who had implemented similar policies and were able to effectively decrease sales to young people. So last July, the board held a work session to discuss the research on effective tobacco retail licensing programs and potential components for such a policy here. At that time, staff was asked to work with county council on a proposed ordinance for the board to discuss. Soon thereafter, the board began its work on your own strategic plan and ultimately included adopting a tobacco retail licensing program as one of your top 5 priority areas listed under your goal of improving community health and safety. So then in December, the board adopted ordinance number 1419, which put in place the tobacco retail licensing program, as well as e-cigarette prohibition that was recommended to you by the Health Advisory Committee. Staff was asked to come back with information about implementation and feedback from stakeholders, which we did in May, brought you that information, and based on that discussion, the board asked staff to return with several options for possible amendment to the current tobacco retail licensing program. And that brings us to where we are today with our second reading on those potential amendments. Before I go through the potential amendments, I just quickly wanted to take a moment to remind the public about some of the initial research that you discussed as a Board of Health and Board of Commissioners in prior meetings that was really behind creating this data or creating this ordinance in the first place. We talked about it last July, but I'll underscore again there are 4 elements that the research tells us are part of a strong tobacco retail licensing program. So from a public health perspective, we would want to ensure that the county policy retains these 4 important elements. The first is that all retailers are required to get a license. So that's the first piece, and that it's renewed annually. The second is that a fee is set that's high enough to sufficiently fund a compliance program and enforcement plan. The third is coordination of tobacco regulations, so that anytime there's a violation of a state or federal law, it's also a violation of the retail policy. And then finally, a financial deterrent through fines and penalties that's really sufficient to deter and ensure compliance. So those are the 4 elements from a public health perspective we would look for in a strong policy. So the 4 areas you asked staff to come back with potential amendments in are there on the slide, and I know each of you in your packets have a couple options in several of those areas, so I'd like to quickly go through them just because it can be a little confusing in some of these where we have multiple choices before you. The current code prohibits the use of coupons and discounts, and this was originally included in the code because of the research about how price-sensitive youth are, as well as the frequency with which youth use the discounts. When we talked to retailers, some retailers were concerned because they felt that since this policy isn't consistent in neighboring cities, that really impacts sales in their stores to adults, and that adult customers might take all of their business to retailers inside the cities where they could use their coupons. So the draft language in the code to address this concern basically deletes section 9.753 of the code that speaks to coupons and discounts. The second area you asked us to look at was proximity of retailers to schools, and then the grandfathering language of current retailers. The current code prohibits retailers from locating within 1,000 feet of a youth-serving establishment, which is defined very broadly to include schools, libraries, arcades, recreation facilities. This was originally included in the ordinance because of the research about the impact of tobacco advertising on youth, and most of that advertising now is really centered at retail locations, and the data that shows youth who live in or go to school in neighborhoods with high density of tobacco retailers have higher smoking rates. When we talked to retailers, some retailers were concerned because they felt that even though their current store, if they were located within that 1,000 feet range, would be grandfathered into their location, if they were later to sell their store, the new owners would not be able to sell tobacco, and thus the value of their ability to sell their business would be impacted. We also heard some concern that the density of youth-serving establishments is so high inside of cities that it would not be reasonable to provide any locations for those retailers inside a city with this definition. So the draft language that we have to address this concern deletes sections of Lane Code 9. Oops, I'm sorry. No, this is the one where we have multiple options. So we prepared 4 different options, and we've labeled them A through D for you when you begin your discussion later. The first would be to remove that 1,000-foot restriction entirely. Second, the 2B would be to limit that restriction instead of the broad youth-serving facilities to only identify 1,000 feet of schools. Option 2C would change that 1,000-foot restriction to a 500-foot restriction. And then option 2D doesn't change the 1,000 feet, but looks at instead allowing current locations to be grandfathered. So existing retailers who are within that 1,000 feet boundary would be able to retain their license, and if they sold that business, the same location would be licensed in the future. So those are the 4 options we brought you to consider there. The third area you asked us to look at was the phrase community education. In the original ordinance, we based the language on model language from other communities, and basically it could include the revenue from sales of the licenses could be used for educating both the community and the tobacco retailers. And some concerns were expressed that this could make the code vulnerable to being defined as a tax rather than an administrative fee. And as you know, local governments are preempted from adopting tobacco taxes. In Lane County, our license fee is set at only $200 per year, which really only raises enough money to administer and enforce the ordinance, and there really aren't additional funds for broad community education. However, I know that County Council has done a review of this issue for you and recommends that the application fee revenue not be permitted to be used for community education. So the draft language before you basically deletes 2 words out of 9.766, which is "and community," and would leave the rest of that section intact. And then finally, the 4th area you asked us to look at was fines and penalties. The current code language was based on ordinances from other communities that used a 5-year look back for determining the progression of fines, suspensions, and revocations when a retailer would violate terms of the code. This was originally included to create a sufficient deterrent for retailers who violate the law. We also talk about that as putting teeth in the law, and the board had talked about that. Some retailers expressed concerns that the schedule was really too stiff by having a 5-year look back and left them vulnerable to action, for instance, by disgruntled employees who might try to have a retailer lose their license and intentionally violate the code. Some also suggested that the penalties would make sense to more closely model those on what the Oregon Liquor Control Commission does related to alcohol sales. So there are 3 amendments drafted to address this particular issue. And in this case, they're not really mutually exclusive. You could adopt none of them or all of them or some combination thereof. The first of them, option 4A, shortens that look-back period from 5 years to 3 years. And the second one, option 4B, revises the fines and suspension schedule to bring it more closely in alignment with OLCC. And then option 4C includes in the language a reference to the ORS that prohibits clerks and would basically fine clerks as well as the retailer for any violation. So that is my overview of the packet in front of you today. And of course, I'm happy to answer questions now or after the public hearing.
So questions for staff? Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Karen, you said that in item 4 you could adopt multiple if choose. I wonder if that's possible too with item 2, which is the
proximity to schools.
For proximity to schools, so a person could do possibly B and D.
B and D, is that what you said? Yes, Commissioner. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? If there are no further questions, then I would move on to the public hearing. So I'd like to open the public hearing on Ordinance 1505. And we have about 6 people signed up to speak right now. And the first person is Wendy Simmons, and she'll be followed by Rhonda Mays.
Good morning. I'm Wendy Simmons, and I live in Eugene, and I'm the Employee Wellness Coordinator at Lane Community College. And I really appreciate the great work you've done in passing this strong and effective tobacco retail license ordinance with the purpose of reducing the number of children in our community who will become addicted to tobacco. I, like you, the Board of Health, feel obligated to protect our children, to create a healthy environment where our kids can grow up and thrive. The science is clear that increasing the price of tobacco is the most effective way to prevent a lifetime of nicotine addiction among our children. I'm here because I helped pass the Lane Community College tobacco-free campus policy in 2010, and I keep current on these issues. I do have a question. How do parents of the children who are being affected by this ordinance find out about it? I would believe we would have a lot of parents here testifying if they knew the influence the tobacco industry has had on their children, and that is through low prices, candy and fruit-flavored tobacco products, kid-friendly packaging, and advertising and product placement that appeals to kids. The ban on price discounts and the restriction on retailers within 1,000 feet of schools, which is just a fifth of a mile or about a 5-minute walk, in the ordinance will help to reduce the tobacco industry's influence on our children. If you want to consider the retailers' concerns about being able to sell their businesses, you could approve the proposed amendments to grandfather the retailers that are located within 1,000 feet of child center establishments. I hope you will keep the ordinance strong and set an example for our cities across the county. And you could also consider some of the options presented just now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Rhonda Mays, followed by Terry Alberts.
Hello, I am Rhonda Mays, and I own the Riverview Market at the corner of Camp Creek and Marcola Road, about 2,000 feet outside of Springfield city limits. Okay, since this ordinance went into effect on January 15, 2015, my tobacco sales have decreased immensely. This doesn't mean people have quit smoking or using tobacco. It means they're buying their tobacco products elsewhere. Therefore, my business is suffering in all aspects. Every day I have customers get so angry at my higher prices that they leave. They just don't understand that this ordinance is what's making my prices higher. Because it also it's not out in the public, so customers don't understand that I can't take coupons. They think I'm doing something against the law. So they leave. This ordinance is unfair in every way, not only in the way of my store not taking coupons or getting promotions, but in the way that I will never be able to sell my business when that time comes. I am here again begging you all to please take out section 9.754, the limits on eligibility for a tobacco retailer license. This part of the ordinance will force so many of us to close our doors when the time comes, as no one will ever buy a store they cannot sell tobacco in. Again, I am located 200 feet from the Child Center, where the kids are not even allowed to leave campus. Our store actually donates to the Child Center and helps them at Christmas with doing a gift tree in our store for the children whose families can't afford presents. If anything, I feel we're helping them, not hurting them. We feel you are unfairly targeting us. When the truth be known, we do everything we can not to sell tobacco to minors. It's the last thing we would want to do. I have nothing outside of my store tobacco related. I refuse to put anything up because I just don't feel that that's right. I do not have candy cigarettes. I don't have candy chew. I don't have any of that stuff out. All of my tobacco is behind the counter, and the signs are up and far away from little children. All of us little stores out in unincorporated Lane County are very important parts of the communities we serve. We are gathering places for the locals, community builders, and meeting places. We sponsor local sports teams, local newspapers, do fundraisers for sick people in the community, etc. This ordinance not only affects me, it will affect everyone down the line. The ripple effect of this is going to have such an impact on the economy of Lane County as a whole. People will have to shut their doors, buildings will be vacant, tax dollars lost. This one little part of the ordinance will have such a huge effect. Please think of how many futures you will negatively affect if you take away the chance for us to ever be able to sell our businesses, as that is exactly what you will be doing. I truly hope you will reconsider section 9.754 of this ordinance and do away with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Alberts, followed by Ron Hirely, it looks like. I'm not sure.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding the county ordinance relating to the tobacco and vaping products. And I do appreciate all that you have done as far as providing these new amendments, which really reiterate what I'm about to say. So my name is Terry Alberts, and I'm here representing my wife and I as the owners of the Mohawk General Store at 91-130 Donna Road in Springfield. We're located halfway between Springfield and the busy metropolis of Marcola. Our store was built in 1914 and has continuously been a store and community fixture since that time. We've owned the store since October of 2013. Besides the small business ownership opportunity for my wife and I, we also employ 6 to 8 full and part-time employees. I can say that we try very hard to be diligent and vigilant in our efforts to not sell tobacco products to minors. We cover this subject during new employee orientation, and we continually reinforce the message with our employees about not selling to minors. We have covered our concerns regarding this measure before, but to reiterate what they are, first and foremost, we're concerned with the 1,000-foot rule and its associated language. When our store was built, we had a mill across the road, a train depot with the name of Donna on it, and farms nearby. The mill is gone, the railroad is no longer there, and there's a church right across the road from us today. The church is within a couple of 100 feet of our store. The church has Wednesday kids' activities and a vacation Bible school. We provide free ice cream treats to any young person from the church that brings in a certificate saying that they've learned their assigned Bible verses. So we try to cooperate and participate with the church and promote the things that the young people are doing. Our store is grandfathered into the new ordinance, so we're able to obtain our license. However, the way the language currently reads, it says that if we were to sell the store, the next owners would not be able to get a tobacco license. The result would be we would be unable to sell the store. The store would cease to exist, resulting in many people needing to drive 5 or more miles to Springfield to get necessities, and the jobs associated with the store would go away. Not to mention that my wife and I would lose our retirement savings that we put into buying the store. Another concern is our inability to take coupons, and Rhonda mentioned that it creates a disadvantage from a standpoint of people don't understand, well, why can't you take a coupon? These are older adults that are unfortunately hooked on tobacco products. And the final area is discounted products. My competitors in the incorporated areas can obtain and sell discounted products, but I cannot. When I say discounted products, there are cigarettes that they're able to get from a buy-down standpoint, so you can sell them at a discounted rate. We can no longer get those, but everybody in incorporated areas still is allowed to do that, so some of my customers have, moved to buying their products elsewhere. I know that your intentions were good when you passed this measure. You want to protect youth and prevent kids from using tobacco products. However, what the measure says is that you believe that most store owners are selling to whoever walks through the door. I know that my fellow store owners with the Oregon Small Grocers Association that I have spoken with all work very hard to make sure we do not sell to minors. Personally, we have no signs on the exterior of our store that promote tobacco products. We do not sell any e-cigarettes or any vaping products in our store. I recognize that there are stores that do promote cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, and vaping products as their main business. But for many of the small community stores such as ours, the Riverview Market, and Marcola Market, the Dairy Mart stores, and others, we are here to satisfy people's varied product needs and prevent them from having to use up their time and gasoline to drive all the way to town. So I would encourage you to make the needed changes to this ordinance that you have just reviewed that will protect the small business owners and rely on us to be diligent in enforcing the age restriction for tobacco and alcohol that already exists. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So Ron Hirely, followed by Susan Fanner.
My name is Ron Hirely, and I live in Eugene. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. After attending all previous meetings regarding this tobacco ordinance, I have a few suggestions that maybe you would consider. The way it's written now, it creates a huge inequity for some stores who are close to child centers or schools. And as my daughter Rhonda just said, that people come in her store and they think she's gouging them, so they just go down to the Chevron station about a half a mile away and they can buy down with their coupons. And it makes her look like she's just trying to really make an exceeding amount of profit on what she's selling. If you're going to entertain writing an ordinance, you need to have a representative from the grocery industry on your committee. I just feel that there should be some valuable input from a grocer that should sit on this committee. It would be a little more fair to the industry. The way it's sounding now, you will hurt the grocer for the sale of their business. All the grocer wants to do is run their stores for a number of years, and hopefully they can sell it and have a retirement just like you guys want to have someday. So it's just, in all fairness, we want it to be fair. Now, only store owners get the fine. If a clerk sells, if she's a disgruntled clerk and wants to get even with their boss and they want to get them in trouble, they can sell cigarettes on a sting, get caught. The boss gets a fine and they don't. That should be written in that ordinance that that clerk should also get a fine of some sort, just to keep it unfair and on the up and up. Not one grocer in the 23 years that I was in the grocery business that I know of ever wantingly wanted to sell cigarettes to minors. I know in my case, I've had people come in and buy 2 or 3 different brands of cigarettes. I'd turn them down. I know what you're doing, and they wouldn't argue with me because they knew what they were doing too. So it's just, I was diligent on my part, and I know all these other grocers are too. According to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, I got online and looked it up. An article written on June 12, 2014 by an Alexandria Siflin that was published in the Time magazine states that cigarette smoking among school students has dropped to 15.7%, the lowest level in 22 years. The government's goal was to have that at 16% by 2020, so we far surpassed what the government's goal is on teen smoking. It has decreased every year since 1997, which at that time was 36.4%. All this ordinance will do is to punish the small store owner who is just proud to be in a neighborhood to serve the customers within their community. And again, like Rhonda said, they support their community. They give. We gave with our stores. We gave and we gave and we gave to our community. Well, I've always felt we were a very important part of our community. I had the store in Coburg, and I also had the store at Mohawk that now Terry has. I urge you to reconsider rescinding portions of this measure, such as the distance from schools and child centers, if not all of it. And it's been mentioned before, why don't you just wait for the state's ordinance, which you stated is working on a statewide ordinance that would be a little bit fairer to all stores, because right now it's kind of one-sided for some stores and other stores aren't falling underneath this. So I think that we just simply need to stop spinning our wheels on this ordinance and just wait for the state. And maybe the input that you got off of this, you can give to the state. If anything, I would like you to consider that option 2A and remove that restriction, because that's the one that's going to really hurt the stores. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you. There's Susan Fanner, followed by Pat Allen, maybe?
Allen. My name is Susan Fanner. That's P as in Paul, F as in Frank, A-N-N-E-R. I am here as a volunteer, a concerned citizen, and a former healthcare provider here in Lane County. Thank you very much for passing the ordinance on Tuesday, December 16th for the e-cigarette and tobacco ordinance in the rural areas of Lane County. I understand there are concerns regarding the ordinance, in particular the issue of a store located within 1,000 feet of schools, daycare centers, and other establishments that serve children, and that was raised by a number of our rural residents and retailers. I realize also that the tobacco companies spend $1 million a day to keep youth and young adults coming back for more. And I have seen the ravage that tobacco dependence and nicotine addiction causes for men and women in Lane County. Having worked in healthcare and with patients with chronic lung disease in Lane County for over 25 years, I personally appreciate the stringent rules behind the tobacco ordinance. Please, please allow the ban on coupons and discounts to be upheld. Maintaining strong fines and penalties is key to preventing tobacco abuse, and especially in young adults. If amending the policy is necessary, possibly allowing the tobacco retailers who are located within proximity to schools, who would become ineligible to renew or receive a tobacco retail license, having them be able to be exempt from that rule, from said rule after they sell their store. In closing, I would just like to say I appreciate and thank you for your sincere work to improve lung health for all Lane County residents.
Thank you. Pat, Aline?
I'm a proponent, but I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Was there anyone else that wished to speak on the ordinance at the public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing, and we'll move on to Commissioner's discussion. And I have one question for legal counsel, if legal counsel could step up. So, Mr. Dingle, in the code under 9.700 definitions 3 defines the county as being just the unincorporated areas. As we sit as the Board of Health, we have specifically state-identified powers that have been prohibited to the cities. And as we're not a Dillon's rule, we're a home rule county and home rule cities, that basically gives us power for acting as the Board of Health within unincorporated cities. Is that correct? Within incorporated cities, is that accurate?
Chair Bozovich and members of the Commission, yes, that's what you've done in the past. It's an area, as long as it's an area that's related to that.
Yeah. So, and in fact, we are the licensor and inspector of restaurants within city limits and throughout the entire unincorporated Lane County, are we not?
Correct.
So I just want to point that out. We could choose, one of the options available to the board is to amend that portion of the code to remove the language around unincorporated Lane County and have this code apply throughout the entire county and have it apply to inside city limits.
And traditionally what's happened is the board has, generally speaking, sought the consent of those areas before imposing an ordinance on.
I just want to make sure that it's understood we do have that authority, and under the state and the delegated authority from the state as the Board of Health, and specifically in that delegation as the counties being the Board of Health, it prohibits cities from being boards of health. Therefore, we have the power as the Board of Health within city limits. Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to address that comment. I agree with you, and I think if we would remember when we started this conversation, the City of Eugene was engaged in finishing up a process of enacting a sick leave ordinance. And I believe that process impacted unincorporated communities and other cities without them being a part of the process. And if I remember correctly, we could probably go back and verify it in meetings, but I brought that up as a concern as we move forward because there was a thought we could move forward with making this a county-wide ordinance, and I specifically requested, and I thought had support from colleagues, that we don't duplicate a process that we were concerned with the City of Eugene, and that we would try to go to all the cities and receive their support and comments on a county-wide ordinance. Unfortunately, that process didn't really take place, and we moved forward with enacting a unincorporated ordinance. So I agree with you that we talked about it, we had the process, and I think in hindsight, if we would have taken the extra time and went to the cities, we might have been able to get to a county-wide ordinance. But unfortunately, that's not where we're at today. And there's a lot of things. If we was just to enact this, the problem that we have, that we're hopefully going to discuss today with proximity to where youth is served, is, the city of Lowell, we had a representative today from the city of Lowell, they one market that I'm aware of that exists in the city of Lowell probably is well within 500 feet of essentially the schools, gathering places, parks, and it would be almost impossible for this ordinance to be implemented inside the city of Lowell without some level of accommodation for that. We're not going to receive their support. And that's the challenge that we have within the cities, that it, needs to be, if we're going to make this a countywide ordinance at some point, needs to be addressed and hopefully get their support so that we can be effective in reducing underage use of tobacco products.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up, and I think the description of the sick leave ordinance leaves out a critical factor. No one from unincorporated Lane County voted for any city councilors or the mayor.
Right.
I have in my rural, quote, rural district, over 40,000 incorporated city residents that were, the voting population comes from. In fact, the majority of my quote, rural district is incorporated voters. So, they actually had an opportunity to elect us as commissioners. In fact, in the case of Commissioner Sorensen or Commissioner Farr, it was entirely incorporated folks that elected them. So there is representation there, and if our choice was to make this countywide, I think we would have much more justification than the city of Eugene did in passing an ordinance that impacted outside their city limits, where there was no representation. I bring that up because as we get to some of the items we're going to discuss, if we did choose to make it countywide, I would strongly fight for eliminating the location standards because there are the issues. In fact, that was one of the issues that came up in Cottage Grove, was it was impossible to even meet a 500-foot standard in Cottage Grove. So that's it's a separate issue in some ways as we go through each one of these items. But I just wanted to bring forward the fact that we do have the power as a board to decide. If we're talking about border issues, we could make this a countywide ordinance. And in fact, I plan to bring forward an additional Fifth Amendment about age of purchase and age of use and possession that I believe would be better off being a countywide ordinance versus a unincorporated only ordinance, of increasing that age to 21 over a three-year phase-in. So I just wanted to make sure we understood our legal ability to choose whether we do this unincorporated or countywide, and how that impacts our decisions around the various options on the amendments to the ordinance. We are going to have to, after today, once we decide and pick and choose from our menu of options, go to a third reading anyway, because I don't believe we're going to, even if we picked a certain set from what was advertised, I still think it requires another reading. And that was another question I wanted to ask council, was if depending on how the board decides, or if we pick, if we decide not to do anything with option 1 or 3, but we do choose to make an amendment in area 2 and 4, we still have to go to another reading. Is that an accurate statement?
I believe, Chair Bozovich, I believe that is, because the idea is that the public would have the opportunity to comment on the version that the board is going to adopt.
Right.
And apparently, unless you adopted the version that's in front of you as is, that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, which has multiple options in it, so it's going to be. So I think, now that we're to the point where the board needs to discuss and decide on those options, I don't know whether we want to do it one option at a time and start from one and work our way down, or how you guys want to move forward with this. I think it might be easiest to do it that way and move an option down each item, or if somebody wants to make a motion with the options they think are the ones they want, and we can vote on that, and if it turns out it doesn't get support, then we'll go back, and it's I think might be easiest though to at least have a discussion of each option and kind of get a sense of the board before somebody makes a motion. So with that in mind, if I can get back to my report here, under option 1, the first item is the discounting and coupon acceptance. Is there discussion of that item? Commissioner Stewart.
I guess I'd like to start out the conversation with the reason I supported us having further conversations on this is that I want to try to address the fairness issues that exist here. And, in our haste to try to, I think, do good in trying to reduce use by minors, I'm struggling to deal with the fact that I'm willing to hypothetically take 50,000 unincorporated residents and approximately 50 stores and, put an incredible financial burden upon them that's not fair to, that the others don't have to do. And I'm not saying that I don't support, hypothetically, this first item, not that I don't support taking coupons, but I'm trying to find the fairness in 40 or 50 stores that have operated, as was pointed here, potentially 100 years and been a part of the community. And the point I'm trying to make here is how important these stores are. As, I gain an incredible respect for these stores and appreciation for these stores. Just recently, when I moved 20 miles from my Cottage Grove and an additional 15 miles out in the rural inter area and lived with my father-in-law while I was building a house. And thank goodness there was Kirk Mercantile within a quarter of a mile of the house, because when you need a gallon of milk, you don't want to drive 20 miles to get a gallon of milk. Not to mention the importance of how that they build community and being there. I have watched stores go out of business because we've lost mills, we've lost all these other things, and I don't want to be the person branded with, well, I ran that store out of business because I was trying to combat a health issue. I'm not going to take that responsibility, because I don't want to see us, the federal government's doing a great job, and I don't want to be a part of the federal government's job of converting our rural communities into essentially rural ghettos. And I don't want to be a part of that. And I think that we can address the fairness issues, and I believe it's important that if we could get all of our incorporated cities to agree that we want to not honor in Lane County coupons, great. But I don't think it's fair to the people that I represent and was elected by to essentially make them the the poster child for this, and we look back and nobody's following. That's not going to be acceptable for me.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. A couple of things that are important to note. The first thing I'm going to talk about is I moved to this country in 1965, and my dad smoked cigarettes when I came to this country. And in England, cigarettes were very, very, very expensive. When he came to this country, they all of a sudden became really inexpensive and very easy to obtain. And so my father, like many other men and women who suddenly have an opportunity to buy something that they enjoy at a far cheaper price, went from about half a pack of cigarettes a day to 4 packs of cigarettes. When I say a 20 cigarette pack. And I'm not saying that it was good that he did that, but because it was so much less expensive. We started driving a lot more because gas was less expensive too. There are all kinds of things we could do in America that we couldn't do in England because things were less expensive. And at the time, my dad started smoking Bel Air cigarettes. Bel Air cigarettes had menthol, and menthol was healthy. It made, everything smelled good, and consequently, he smoked a lot of cigarettes. And in later years, my father quit smoking cigarettes. He was able to quit, as was my mother able to quit, but it was too late for him. They'd already succumbed to the ill effects and the terminal issues that cigarette smoking caused them. So, you know, I have to weigh everything in light of the fact that because cigarettes became really available, my dad sometimes would light one cigarette off another cigarette. You know, and he's not the only person. And we can all cite examples of the ease of obtaining cigarettes and the inexpense of cigarettes, particularly in the 70s and 80s. Made people smoke a lot more. And so making it harder for people to get cigarettes, potentially, in fact, absolutely, is going to make people smoke less cigarettes. Now, the other thing I'm going to point out is our Community Health Improvement Program has 5 points. Advance and improve the health equity. Who can argue with that? Improve access to health care. We love it. Slow the increase of obesity. One of the greatest factors in mortality in the nation is obesity. Prevent and reduce substance abuse and mental illness. We're all on board with that. And number 3 of the 5 is prevent and reduce tobacco use. Now, if we're going to do what we say we're going to do, we have to seriously consider how are we going to implement that. One of the greatest ways is to make it more expensive for people to smoke. Another way is would be to make it completely unavailable. Now, if we could pass a nationwide ban on cigarettes completely, that would be the best thing. It's not going to happen. So I listened very closely to what Commissioner Stewart had to say just now regarding the fairness. And I listened to the testimony from the lady from Riverside Market. Let's see. Rhonda Mays. Thank you, Ms. Mays. And her father, you know, being able to drive down the street a few blocks and buy cigarettes doesn't prevent people from smoking cigarettes. Making them more expensive here and still not more expensive there doesn't prevent people from smoking cigarettes. When my dad went to the shops in Sheffield, he couldn't go to another shop a mile away and get it cheaper. It was the same price everywhere. So the fairness issue is something that we really have to adhere to while we are strongly adhering to the very important principles of our Community Health Improvement Plan. And while we have a greater goal of reducing, preventing tobacco use and stopping kids from smoking tobacco, really we have to bear in mind what is it that we're doing to the overall picture in Lane County, and are we really effectively stopping people from smoking cigarettes by making it more expensive for Ms. Mays to sell cigarettes, but not the Chevron station just down the road, making it more expensive for our locally owned businesses to sell cigarettes, but not more important from Safeway and Albertsons and Walmart and the other places that sell cigarettes to sell cigarettes. You know, so it's we have to. I personally have to balance that in my mind when we're looking through the different options that we have of revising the ordinance that I signed in December, and I signed in goodwill, good faith, and with the intention of making it more difficult for kids to start smoking, more difficult for people to continue their habit of smoking, and more appealing for people to stop smoking. So bearing that in mind, I listened very carefully to what Commissioner Stewart had to say, and particularly in light of the Kirk Mercantile that he mentioned. It's the small markets out in the outlying areas, it's hard for me to place restrictions on them that aren't being placed on their neighbors just a few blocks away, in some cases just a few hundred yards away. So consequently, as we go through the different, and I like Commissioner Bozovich's, Chair Bozovich's suggestion that we go through each amendment one at a time. But really, when I go through this, I'm going to think about our Community Health Improvement Plan. I'm going to think about shortened lives, about grandchildren who don't get to see their grandparents. And so, you know, I mean, so it's important to me to balance this. And while I want everybody to quit smoking, I want 0 kids to ever start smoking. We have to consider what it does for the local businesses. And while at the same time, if I could ensure that by preventing Ms. Mays from selling cigarettes at any price at all, if I could ensure that nobody would, because of that, nobody was going to buy them, then I'd say, Ms. Mays, you're not going to get sell cigarettes. But I don't think that's the case. I think people are just going to drive down the street. And so whatever decision I make has to balance that. The very deep emotional feelings that I have about tobacco use and about nicotine addiction, the very deep emotional feelings I have about that, based upon what is the impact of the ordinance that we have passed, that I signed, and what amendments can we make to make it more fair, more appealing, and still have the general effect of making people reducing the impact on children starting smoking cigarettes. So we'll move forward with this, and I may have a few more things to say, Chair Bozovich, but that's basically how I feel. Tears come to my eyes. I mean, I'm choking a little bit as I say these words, but the balance has to be there for me. So let's go forward with the discussion. Thank you.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since day one, in fact, when this ordinance was first passed, it was actually a pretty divided commission. In fact, the vote was 3-2, and I would say that the two who voted no, which I was one of them, had very little to do, if nothing to do, with public health. This was a fairness issue since day one for me personally. And if we even entertain the idea of going down this road about using our public health authority, we need to have very good dialogue with the cities before we go down that road. I just recently again talked to Mayor Lundberg, asking her where the city of Springfield is. They've decided they're going to put their eggs in the state's basket, and that's the road that they plan on going. I'm going to remind this board that right now, nearly 75% of all citizens in Lane County live in an incorporated city. 63% live in either Eugene or Springfield, in the city, not the shopping area, but actually within the city limits. And I think the testimony is very good. I've stopped by that market, I don't know how many times over the years, coming back from Springfield Country Club. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I think that this is not centered around the public health issue. This is centered around what is right for these, you can call them mom and pop. I call them entrepreneurs, business people, small business people, community-based business people trying to make a living. And this is probably the biggest issue I've had with this since day one. I think I've been pretty consistent on voicing that. I've talked to both Alicia and Karen, publicly obviously, but privately too. And I feel like that. I mean, it's fine. I'm interested in going down each one of these, but I just feel like since day one, we got away from the public health aspect, and instead we should have really been looking at this ordinance on how it affects every business throughout Lane County. The testimony is perfect. I mean, it's stunning. If you only knew, like you said, the gas station that's just a half mile away from the market. They don't have to go in the market and go right down the street, buy their cigarettes. And whether we like it or not, tobacco right now in the United States is legal. And I do agree we need to make sure we get this out of the hands of youths. But again, people have their choices. I have never smoked and do not plan on it. And I think part of it, let me take that back. I tried it once, and my grandfather did the best thing ever for me. I was 5 years old, and he said, take the biggest puff on that thing you can possibly imagine. And I think I turned green. And that ended that for me real quickly. So one puff on a cigarette at 5 years old, and I was done. And by the way, that was in Arizona. It wasn't in Oregon. So, but that took care of that. So, I mean, I understand. I hear the stories. But really, this comes down to the issue of whether we want to be supportive of our businesses that are outside of the cities. And frankly, this ordinance really has some real challenges. I think the amendments that we've proposed, there's still some challenges there. And I think the perfect example is once they want to sell the business, the estate planning kind of goes out the door, and that'll be pretty challenging. So I look forward to our discussion. But I will say I feel like I've been very, very consistent since day one, in my opinion. It has zero to do with the public health aspect, but instead it has more to do with the fairness aspect. I appreciate Commissioner Farr. In fact, Commissioner Farr and I were talking the last time we had this discussion about the fact that both of us have been very consistent in our approach and our opinion on this. And but I do look forward to going through these. I think Commissioner Bozovich is right that I think we probably should go through these one by one just to figure out how we want to deal with this. But again, thank you for the testimony today.
So relative to this specific item and the coupons and price discounts, first, one of the things that America's coming to a realization is prohibition does not work for anything. And Oregon in particular has realized this. We passed Measure 91 last year, realizing that we can't even prohibit something, that is an intoxicant. But when we did legalize it, we said 21 and over and a lot of restrictions and all that. Same thing with alcohol. America toyed with, did prohibition on alcohol and realized it was still going to be available. We could pass a national prohibition on tobacco products. Tobacco is easy to grow, just like marijuana. There would be a black market and it would be sold anyway. And then there would be no controls over it. So that you always have to balance regulation with the fact that you can generate a black market with regulation and how that all does, and the fairness in it. One of the things I look at is, this is a public health issue. Economics and public health are ultimately closely integrated. One of the largest drivers of health outcomes is whether or not you're in poverty. In fact, it's a bigger driver than obesity and tobacco use, statistically. Putting small community markets in this unfair disadvantage to one of their most profitable items where people can cross borders, I think is wrong. And I think is actually against our public health plan. One of the things we want to try and drive is a reduction in adverse childhood experiences. Poverty is a huge driver of ACEs. We really want to have these small community markets that are, entrepreneurs, husband and wife that own and hire a couple local teenagers and keep them off the streets and busy and with spending money and drive them out of the community. And in addition, cause those folks in those communities to drive an extra 20 miles for a gallon of milk, which is contributing, carbon to the atmosphere, and they're not walking when they could, or bicycling up to the local market. All those things. Think of those other, the unintended consequences of an action. And is that actually a net health negative compared to, well, we couldn't quite do the discount price prohibition in the unincorporated areas? I think if we are going to choose to keep this, then we need to amend that first section. We need to say we're going to do this countywide. Because if we keep this, we're setting up an inequity in Lane County. And it's not just the Riverside market. It's the Ada market outside of Florence. They're all over the place. It's the Elmira Hilltop market versus Veneta. You name it. They're all over. So we need to look at this and say, is it fair? And this is something I identified when we first tried to pass the ordinance back, and one of the reasons I voted against it was I had this exact amendment, eliminate that section. So I would support, unless the board is ready to go with a countywide ordinance that covers everybody, that I would support removing the coupon and price discount prohibition as a matter of fairness and as a matter of keeping our rural economics going, which has health implications.
My question, Mr. Chair, do you want to go through each of these with a motion, or are you going to do head nods for?
I think ultimately we need to have a single motion. Well, I guess we could do it motion by motion, and then ultimately we could make sure staff understands what we're doing, approving then we'll have to have a final motion approving the second reading and setting a third reading and public hearing. So, but we could do a single motion on each one of these.
So to get us started, Mr. Chair, I'd move that we would remove the current code LC 9.753 K through 9, which prohibits honoring or accepting discounts and coupons for tobacco purchase.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to eliminate LC 9753 K through N. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Sorensen.
I'm opposed to this motion because, as we heard in the presentations and also in the public testimony from the medical and health people, discounts and coupons are one of the major marketing techniques that the tobacco industry uses to market tobacco products and to assist in the sale of tobacco that otherwise wouldn't be purchased. So I think that the idea of helping stores by letting them sell tobacco lower price with the subsidy being provided by the big tobacco corporations isn't really a good approach. I think what we ought to be doing is focusing on the public health aspects of it, and the discounting and the subsidization by the big tobacco companies of those purchases really is counter to the whole purpose of the ordinance. So on this proposed amendment to take out the coupons and price discounts, I don't see how that is achieving the goal of our policy. Now, if the goal of the policy is to help the store in selling the tobacco, then this deletion does help that goal. And I think that's one of the things we're going to have to come to grips with here, is that a lot of people make money off of tobacco, not just the big tobacco companies that buy it from the growers and turn it into cigarettes and market it to the distributors. But a lot of people along the way make money from it. So yes, it does deal with keeping stores in business that sell tobacco, but it doesn't help us with our objective, as I understand the main purpose of it. So if the goal is to help the retailers, keep them going, keep them selling the product, then I think this amendment does the job. And I gather that there's a lot of interest in keeping those 50 stores going. Those stores are important to the communities. But the goal of this legislation, the goal of this policy, is to try to reduce this horrible cycle where the tobacco industry keeps coming up with different ideas of how to keep marketing that product. And it's killing people. And I think that we can't, I think at least I can't, in good conscience, delete one of the most significant parts of the ordinance that we have, and one that will be used in the future if the state ever does or the cities ever do work on this issue. They'll be faced with the same dilemma that we are.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, for your statements on that. You know, I sign my letters to seek to make thy course regular, that men may know beforehand what they may expect. So that what that tells me is that better do what you say you're going to do, and better say what you are going to do. And if you change your mind, have a very good reason to change your mind. I signed this ordinance in December of 2014, and I signed it with once again with good intent, fully with good intent. And if I'm going to change my mind on any part of it, I better have a good reason for changing my mind on any part of it. And as I consider the motion that's on the table right now, I think about really what is the intent. Well, the intent is to make cigarettes more expensive. The intent is to make it so that big tobacco cannot subsidize the cost of people becoming further and deeper addicted to the products that they sell. Now, that being said, if you can drive down the road and still get it anyway, and there's a few pennies worth of gas, or you're cycling down the road to get it, I don't think that that particular provision of this ordinance is doing anything other than having a harmful effect on the small grocers that are close by someplace where people could buy cigarettes anyway. You know, not too long ago, I got an ad in the Eugene Weekly, a local publication, that had free cigarettes. You just send away a coupon for free cigarettes. Didn't even have to deal with a retailer here in town. It was American Spirit cigarettes. Send away and we'll send you a couple of packs of free cigarettes. Well, I don't know if those ads are legal anymore, but it doesn't seem right that, you know, people can do that and circumvent shopping at a local grocery store. It doesn't seem right they could shop anywhere and get the coupons. However, that being said, make that course regular. My course is regular. I want people to stop smoking cigarettes and not start smoking cigarettes. That being said, I don't know that this provision in our ordinance does that. I don't think it's adhering to what we are intending in our CHIP. Therefore, I'm going to vote in favor of this motion. And hopefully we can, Commissioner Bozievich, look at it on a countywide basis, because then it becomes much easier. Then it's only the difference between Junction City and Harrisburg, as opposed to Kirk Mercantile and a store in Cottage Grove, for instance. So it's, to me, I signed the ordinance in good faith. That this provision was in the ordinance. I don't know upon reevaluation this provision is doing exactly what I hoped it would do or what it is intended to do. Therefore, I'm going to vote in favor of the motion.
Commissioner Stewart?
Mr. Chair, and I'll try to be quick. I want to say that I make the motion to do this because it's not countywide. If it was a countywide situation and it affected everybody equally in the county, I would be supportive of what Commissioner Sorensen said, but unfortunately I can't do that, and I've already stated the fairness issue about this, and I understand staff. I mean, they've done a lot of work, and I appreciate their hard work and effort in trying to take our goals in reducing the minors' access to this product and hopefully keeping them from starting to smoke. And I think that these other components in here is a step forward and can achieve some of that. So I say that just so that folks know that I'm not opposed to coupons. It's just not in this fashion.
Any further discussion? So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. So just a little note on process. We're coming up on an 11:30 time certain, so maybe we can start talking about item 2, and then we'll probably have to recess the Board of Health meeting and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners and have our 11:30 time certain, and then we'll have to come back to the Board of Health after that. So my apologies, but that's the way things go sometimes. It's an important issue, and it's a great discussion. So moving on to the second item for amendment, which is the location standards. Commissioner Stewart.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. In giving this some thought, and I heard the public comment, I believe that we can limit some of the negative impacts that were stated earlier and not have to completely remove the item. In my thought process, for those of us that have kids and our kids go to public schools, it's mandated and they go to the school system. And, so I can see a possible ban of 1,000 feet on the schools and schools only. I really struggled with the fact that we included wherever kids might end up, whether it's ballet school or something where I choose to take my kids and most likely choose to participate with them and feel like your parents are responsible for what your kids are doing. But schools, I put them on a school bus at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they come home at 4 o'clock at night, and what happens in between. So I think that you could still leave 2B in there with the limitation and put it solely on schools, and I would quantify that as public schools, so it's pretty clear. And then add option 2D, which would grandfather the stores that are impacted by that restriction so that they could their stores grandfathered until I guess the stores tore down or no longer existent, and future owners could maintain that license. So I would propose that we consider combining 2B and D and defining schools as public schools.
Further discussion on this matter? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Regarding the restriction on schools, my contention from the beginning was that retailers should just enforce the law and not sell to kids, and that the restriction on schools therefore was not significant at all, because if they're not selling the cigarettes to kids and they're demonstrating that they're not going to sell the cigarettes to kids, then to me initially that was what that restriction was mainly in regard to. But you brought up a very important element of that, Karen, when Ms. Gaffney, when you were talking about the marketing that occurs around cigarette displays inside of stores, that the subliminal marketing when kids go in there and see Joe Cool smoking a Camel. And the frequency of kids maybe going to stores that are closer to their school, closer to the places that they play. So that really added another element. To me, when I looked at this, I thought, why have any restriction at all? Because after I reviewed it, why have any restriction at all? Because if we're not selling to kids, then that's the main issue. But it's the marketing. It's the Joe Cool. Do they still do Joe Cool on the Camels? I don't know. And so, so that really adds a new twist to me. So I'm going to listen to the discussion a little bit further, and I'm not really fully decided on this ordinance yet. I may still be a no on it. I may be a no on it based upon the further information that I received today. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Is there a definition, maybe Mr. Dingle knows this, is there a definition of schools in option 2B? What is a school? Is the Lane County Youth Campus a school?
It is defined in the ordinance as a private or public kindergarten, elementary, middle, junior high, or high school.
Or high school.
Right.
So would an educational opportunity, I don't know, what would come to mind?
I can give you an example. I know, like, for example, when I used to, when this restriction, although it doesn't follow the exact definition, there's enhanced penalties for selling drugs within 1,000 feet of a school.
Right.
And we quickly found in the city of Salem that there were a number of places that no one knew were schools. Like, there were private religious schools primarily. So there was a small preschool that was by a park that encompassed. So I think under this definition, the way does it say public or public and private?
Yes, but it lists the schools.
Yeah, public or private. Yeah, so it would encompass that type of thing.
Okay. And for, I guess, educational opportunities, I was thinking about youth groups, that would be excluded. So a youth activity, I'm thinking about my own youth, Boy Scout troop meets at a church. Church isn't a school. Maybe sometimes it's a school. Other times it's where the Boy Scout troop meets.
I think what I understood was the intent of this was, for example, I think that your example is the same, which is I think Commissioner Stewart mentioned, taking to a soccer place or a music. I think he used ballerina. That would not be. I understand that that's not within the idea of, or within the concept of school. Is that right?
Okay.
And they're certainly learning something, but I don't think that that's the intent. Is that right?
Kindergarten, elementary, middle,
right.
junior high, or high.
So right now there's a 1,000-foot restriction on proximity to kids as opposed to proximity to schools.
Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, the current ordinance defines pretty broadly youth-serving organizations, so it includes schools and a whole lot of other things like parks and arcades in your current ordinance. So I think the discussion now is whether you wanted to limit that, and then however you want to limit it, we can certainly bring you back that language.
Okay. And what's your understanding of this current language? This current language is public schools and just public schools that a school district administers, and not parks that a city administers, and not Boy Scout troops that church sponsors, not 4-H groups, whatever.
And Chair Bozievich and Commissioner Sorensen, and this is, you have 3 different versions of the code from
Okay.
County Council attached to your packet. So this is the particular area where it gets a little confusing. In version 2 is where you can see the language that would be in, actually, Commissioner Stewart's idea of combining option 2B and 2D are in the second version of the proposed code language. And it would basically, for the purposes of this subsection, it would be a private or public kindergarten, elementary, middle, junior high, or high school is what the definition would be as we brought the language. You could certainly make that only public
Okay.
schools if you wanted to.
But parks, for example, would be taken out.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Commissioner Lykin.
Another slippery slope on schools. So where does homeschooling fall into this? And what's interesting about homeschooling, of course, is that many times when you're homeschooled, you actually get to participate in athletics in a public school. So how does this basically fall under the public school aspect? Because I have absolutely no idea.
I'm Commissioner, I'm nervous to answer this as a school board member. So I don't want to sound biased about homeschools at all. But it would not, homeschool would not fall under being a private school. There's requirements around that to be a private school. If you needed us to tease those out, we could.
No, I'm just asking a basic question because, frankly, I've known a lot of families who homeschool their kids, but yet their kids do participate in public school athletics, and so that's why I was trying to figure out where does this fall under.
Yeah, Commissioner, you're correct. They not only can participate, they do sometimes group events. I mean, that's part of homeschooling. So you might have a group at a home, not just the children that live there. You're right. You're correct.
I'm good. You don't have to tease any more out, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
What's that?
So I just have a clarification and question about option 2D. That clearly states that if you are currently within a location and you know your existing location as of the time we passed the ordinance violated the 1,000-foot standard, that you're allowed to continue to operate your store, but it also states that you're allowed to transfer the tobacco license to a new owner.
Yes, Chair Bozievich, I know many people may not have the copy in front of them, so I can read you that sentence if that would be helpful.
But I want the secondary thing to that is what happens if I currently own a store that's not within 1,000 feet of any of those child-used facilities or whatever, however we're explaining that, but one opens during the course of my holding a tobacco license within that 1,000 feet, and then I'd go to sell my store. Do I have a problem with transferring my license?
The way, Chair Bozievich, the way this is written, your location would be grandfathered in. So as long as you haven't moved your store, if you sell your store, the next owner could have a license to sell tobacco there.
Excellent. I just want to make sure that was clear, that there wasn't an issue, because one of the things I see is, particularly when it comes to schools, a lot of times it requires a zoning action of the county to approve their location, or city, if we were doing in cities, but out in the county, in particular in the county, because there is quite in fact, I'm dealing with Elmira High Schools having to go through a zoning Elmira Elementary Schools having to go through a zoning action to reconstruct their school under their bond measure, because they're moving the building slightly on the footprint of their property, but they're in a rural zone, so they have to go through that planning process because there's such a restriction on public facilities outside of incorporated cities. And it's part of the whole, urbanization goal of the statewide planning goals. So we always have decisions around schools to make. If we approve a relocation or a new school to open, and it's within a certain distance of a tobacco retailer that has an existing license, and we suddenly make their value of their property, close to zero because they can't transfer it, that was my real concern, was a future issue where we're going to be liable for taking the value of that property through a zoning action we take as a board. That's why I originally brought up this whole issue. It was not necessarily over, fairness and everything else and helping these folks keep their value, I was concerned about the liability on the county's end. And limiting it to schools, public schools, I think in particular, and the fact that this ordinance only applies to unincorporated areas hits very close to where those are what we're going to be taking action on. We won't necessarily take a legal action for somebody opening an arcade that caters to kids, or if there's a park or something like that. But I can guarantee you, if there's a new public school or a change in location of a public school in the rural Lane County, there will be a county zoning action attached to that, because that's the way our code reads. So, changing this to just public schools, I think, is definitely gets to the heart of what I was concerned about, and then allowing that that grandfathering, whether that you were within 1,000 feet to begin with, and something new opens up, and continuing that grandfathering for that new, I think is a good idea. So I would support Commissioner Stort's suggestion for having item 2B, but limiting it to public schools, and also including 2D, which allows for that grandfathering and prevents us from accidentally taking the value of a business with some kind of action we take subsequently to approve the zoning of a new facility.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that option under proximity to schools and grandfathering clause be amended to reflect option 2B and 2D.
Is that with public schools?
With public schools, specifying schools.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No. No.
Motion passes 3-2. So I am going to stop right now and recess the Board of Health meeting. And then I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. And under adjustments to the agenda, we are going to jump to item 8B, which is a time certain item that we're already 5 minutes late for, and it's a report from the Coast Fork Willamette Watershed 2014 annual report, update on current programs. After this item, we are going to jump back. We're going to recess the board meeting and go back into the Board of Health, Board of Commissioners joint meeting and finish our previous items. So with that, I will invite Pamela Reber up to the table here, and I'll turn the meeting over to you for your report.
Thank you so much. I was going to load my PowerPoint presentation, if that...
Sure. If I'd known you had that, you could have been loading that while we're talking.
Oh, I think it should go pretty fast. Ready?
Yeah.
Very quick. Well done.
Thank you. Nice to see you all this afternoon, or this morning. My name is Pam Reber. I'm the director of the Coast Fork Willamette Watershed Council, and I'm just here for our biennial check-in with you as our local representatives. And I'm going to take about 10 minutes, I hope, to present, maybe a little bit less because we are time constrained. And then I'm happy to answer any questions or facilitate any dialogue that you're interested in. So just as a quick recap, this is a map of the watershed, and our mission is to enhance the Coast Fork Willamette watershed through restoration, monitoring, education, and stewardship. And and so you see that both the Eugene, Springfield area, as well as Crestwell and Cottage Grove are kind of the heart of our population centers. Today, I wanted to walk through our 2014 accomplishments. Again, refresh you about our organization itself, and then I'll give you a couple highlights on projects we're working on in 2015. And so in your packet, you have both our 2014 annual report as well as our most current newsletter. And as far as the audience goes, maybe there's not an audience, there are annual reports up at the front. So we've got a great board of directors, many educators, but great representation from all of those population centers. And we're really thrilled to have a number of young people on our board as well. So our new secretary is a U of O law student, and our new vice president is a young farmer in the Cloverdale area. And in addition, yeah, we have some great expertise. And let's see. So moving on to some project highlights. For 2014, we were thrilled to complete our Mosby Creek Phase 2 project, our work at the Hollier Prairie site. We also embarked on action planning and started our work on Japanese knotweed. So I'm not sure if you can see the inset map on this one. Backing up, our watershed headwaters has 3 major tributaries coming in, and as you can see, 2 of 3 of those are dammed. And so the undammed one is Mosby Creek, and that's been a priority area for us for about the last 5 years. And in 2014, we completed our second phase of work with a robust partnership, including ODFW Springfield, the ODFW Habitat Program that unfortunately was cut in the recent state budget, Weyerhaeuser, Eugene BLM, and the National Council for Air and Stream Improvement. And the orange dots represent our first phase of work, and our second phase augmented just downstream of one section and then worked within a second section. You can see that a little more closely in this map. And it's really exciting. There's a very deep pool just above this section. And also I should let you know that we're had some great reports of spring Chinook being caught just in the last month or so in pools near Cottage Grove in particular. Last fall, we were seeing flows that were pretty low in Mosby Creek about the time that fish were coming up and spawning near Row River Nature Park, but we're optimistic. And then this is a map of our second area. And here's some pictures from that second area. So the one on the left is a bit dark, but those logs were placed in our first phase of work, and you can see they're relatively conservative in their placement, but that's part of Weyerhaeuser's desire to not have wood moving off their property. But nonetheless, Mosby Creek is a big tributary, and these were still activated. And then we augmented that area with in-stream boulders. And part of that is because our studies have shown that the main limiting factor in this creek is the bedrock-dominated character. And so we're working to grade gravels. So you can see in this photo from our first phase how much material has been able to drop. And one of the things we're excited about is that when we improve when we increase the number of gravels in the stream, we reduce the temperatures, and that's because the sun, rather than just heating up the bedrock that's right below the water surface, is the creek itself is insulated by flowing through the gravels. Essentially, the sun can't reach the bedrock anymore. You have nighttime flows in your gravels, and generally a cooler system. So that's one of the things we're most excited about in this work. And moving on, we've been working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Mackenzie River Trust has a conservation easement on this property in Upper Camas Swale, and it's a conservation area that's a priority for oak and prairie that is actually contiguous over to Fern Ridge, and that complex of work where there's almost 4,000 acres, I think, in conservation there as well. But nonetheless, we were excited to get to burn this prairie after 3 years of mowing invasives, and there was actually some ash tree thinning. One of the things the prairie biologists like to see is the prairies communicating. Their genetics can move around. And it's really neat to see some of the native plants out here. They're very rare. Prairie habitats have been reduced in extent to about 1% of their original habitat extent. So moving on, let's see. Oh, okay, no, that's when it burned, and then this is what it looked like in January. Again, kind of dark. Apologies. So also in 2014, we had some great success on the education and stewardship side of our organization. We launched our science pubs. We launched a Bikes to Blooms wildflower tour with partners. We continued our monitoring. We actually completed a rapid bioassessment of Mosby Creek with our consultants, and continued citizen science, including we have a very active group of birders. But our science pubs have been by far the most popular. For years, watershed councils have struggled with, well, and all public entities, I think, struggle to really get the public engaged, get the public to turn out consistently. And we have kind of a sweet spot with our Science Pub series that we're doing. It's the fourth Tuesdays from 5 to 7, January through November. And it's at the Axe and Fiddle Complex, which is a pub, bakery, bookstore. But it's really given us a chance to really engage, and it's kind of the signature of our member and volunteer program. So some of our speakers, we've just continued to have fabulous speakers. A lot of folks from the Corps of Engineers, including those working on wildflowers, purple martins. You know, really, people love the wildlife topics. We had a great talk by Jeff McEnroe from Roseburg BLM on restoring beaver, and we keep it short and sweet. We do trivia to begin, but and then our presenters have an hour. But it's just been a great educational series. Last month we had Jason Knuckles from the Nature Conservancy talk about the Willamette Confluence Project, and yeah, I would invite you to come down. So I just wanted to highlight a couple projects we're working on in 2015, and we continue to work closely with the cities of Cottage Grove and Cresswell. I think that the commissioners can probably relate to our collective capacity needs and how important it is to work together. And so in our work with both Cresswell and Cottage Grove, neither has a parks department, and both have, somewhat limited planning and public works staff considering how much our cities are required to do. And so we have been wrestling with issues in this Hill Creek area for more than 10 years and have had just so many site visits that I finally proposed to the city, like, why don't you just, support us in writing up the issues. And I've got copies that I can leave with you of this initial management document. But basically, there's, let's see, a diversion, a push-up dam, a fish passage barrier on the Bald Knob site. That's it. And then we have our Garden Lake Park, one of only two parks within the city of Cresswell, and very clearly old gravel pits. And this is really the driver for this document. The city has struggled with algae blooms and weeds in their fishing area, and it's just really tough for them to kind of have that be the public face of their biggest park. But really these things are connected to the volume of flow, and that's connected to the push-up dam and whatnot. We also threw in the sewage treatment ponds as it kind of came clear that kind of best management practices was going to be the best path forward, and we'd love to see the city and Emerald Valley both kind of move into modern treatment systems. And I think also our downstream farmers have taken a lot of heat for potentially for some nitrate concerns or for the algae blooms, when in fact it may not have anything to do with them. So, being good neighbors. Anyway, so we're really excited to just stop the shifting landscape with this document, and I encourage you to take a look, and especially, as you can see, a lot of these issues are outside of city limits, and we're working with Cresswell really on taking the lead, and some of our main recommendations are outreaching to the two organizations that have a lot of influence, and that's a water control district as well as an irrigation district. So it's a complex situation. Seems like there's a little bit more collaborative spirit, and so we'll be there when folks want to move forward. And let's see. Finally, I just wanted to let you know that kind of our main push this summer is on surveying, and we did survey work in 2014, and now we're moving out into cooperative agreements with landowners in the Coast Fork who have Japanese knotweed on their property, and this weed can be a nightmare. Fortunately, we primarily have just small patches in the Coast Fork, so we're really trying to get ahead of it, and we're looking forward to preventing it from being a problem. We look forward also to most likely, conferring with Orrin Schumacher or whomever has taken his new position or his old position on potentially getting this weed out of some county right-of-ways. And then we also secured about $15,000 in in-kind mechanical removal work, and then we have some funding for chemical treatment as well. So that's all that I have for today, but I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Commissioner Stewart. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Pam, for being here today and give us an update of the great work that you're doing in Cottage Grove, Cresswell, and those areas. A couple of different questions and comments. First of all, I just share with you that up Mosby Creek, because I live on Mosby Creek, I was wondering why all these people are fishing on Mosby Creek, but I know the fishing season, at least my traditional fishing season, is not open because my son kept going, hey, Dad, let's go fishing. No, it's not fishing season. And come to find out, they're salmon fishing and catching salmon. So
it's been pretty
that was encouraging. And then a not so encouraging piece is that our black lab got really, really sick. And
no.
Come to find out, we did a little research, and there was multiple dead salmon along our area, and I guess she partaked in it, and so she got salmonella poisoning. But she's doing better now.
Oh, no.
And but I think a lot of that's contributed to the great work that you're doing in the partnership with Weyerhaeuser and the landowners. So thank you for that. Just curious, I was wondering if you had been working with the Forest Service. I know the Forest Service has been doing some work up at the former Champion mine site. I was wondering if you were coordinating with them and following that process a little bit.
Yes. We are trying to wrap up a strategic planning process, and as part of that, we've been kind of having in-depth conversation with our partners, including the Forest Service, and we actually were plotting a tour to the Champion Mine site, where they have a series of filtration ponds, basically, and it sounds like they're interested in, that those need some maintenance. And yeah, we're just in a process of kind of looking on that 3 to 5 year timeline, and we've really actually slowed things down for the council so that we can kind of strategically shift gears. And while I don't think Mercury is going to be like our front and center target in the next couple of years, I think that is it's one of our top 3 pollutants on the water quality front in the Coast Fork, and we'll look for opportunities on where we can continue to support the Forest Service where we can.
Well, I just had family go up there, and it looks like currently right now the Forest Service has a contractor that's vacuuming material out of the mine and doing something with it, and so I just was curious if following that. A couple other quick little things. Yeah. Because you have the partnership with Weyerhaeuser and they're actively logging up Mosby Creek, are you doing any water quality monitoring to try to tie it with relationship to the operations?
No, we are working with, we've met with them as part of the City of Cottage Grove's drinking water protection planning work, and we've been in that conversation for about a year, and we actually have some funding through the Oregon Health Authority to do outreach work in the upriver area around drinking water protection. So we're starting with riparian outreach. We're kind of seeing we just see a real education need in the Coast Fork, so we're kind of trying to take a real strategic approach. Our knotweed landowner outreach is actually part of that, so we figure if we can build trust with folks to let them work on their property, then we can start to influence their decisions, more dealing with like maybe the rural poverty issues, where you see large amounts of trash on the riverbank or potential hazardous material risks. Weyerhaeuser is a tough partner in terms of, our organization is small, and we've dabbled in some water quality monitoring. We were partners in a 2008 to 2010 study that monitored non-point pollution sources in conjunction with 3 other watershed councils, and Mosby Creek actually is one of the highest quality tributaries that we have in the Coast Fork. Monitoring for impacts that may be coming off of an industrial timber site, I honestly would say that at this point, our best bet would be to partner with OSU or be part of a basin-wide study, because what's the scale of timber harvest that's happening in Mosby is very relevant for our watershed. I would say it's very relevant for our drinking water suppliers, but being so far up in the Willamette that we are, it's relevant for everyone, and the practices are similar. So I would love to see ODF take the lead on that, and yes, we can do some monitoring, and I'm happy to, especially educating our youth. That's really kind of the avenue that we're looking at. But really, we're, again, the stewardship piece and engaging the community and just trying to get away from the polarization is really our political mandate, being, in rural Oregon. And so I think we're going to be focusing on riparian enhancement, trying to get some good tree planting projects on the ground. The Row Basin is going to be a big focus area for us, and but temperature monitoring is something that we're going to continue to do. So the temperature is actually a great indicator for water quality, because once the temperatures go up, the oxygen goes down, and there's really no more important component of the water column than oxygen when it really comes down to it. Without oxygen, you get algae. With warmer waters, you get, you run into problems. But I'm happy to, feel free to send me any partnership opportunities.
Right.
I'd love to look into those.
Any other comments or questions?
I just give up one more if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I just like to thank you for, I think you've hit on a really unique way of reaching out to the public, the axe and fiddle, and being able to actually go where people are and bring in some great speakers. So good job on that. I'm not aware of too many other folks that are doing that. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I hope you'll join us.
Yeah. Commissioner Farr.
Thanks for your presentation. I was following on the map, my satellite map, the
great.
Coast Fork, as you were talking along. And, you want to trade jobs? I like what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for the report. And, I always get, I see the notices come out for the Science Pub stuff, and it's a pretty good drive down from Elmira to Cottage Grove.
That's true.
I always say, that looks really interesting.
We are
Looks like I have a
plotting
good beer at the same time.
recording them or something. But
Yeah, so thank you very much.
That's a great idea. You got to get a hold of Garrett Bridgens and see if he can get youth to record it and then rebroadcast it on our community broadcasting.
awesome. Yeah, that's on my to-do list. Okay. Well,
Yep.
yeah. I'll keep you guys posted.
Thank
you. And I've got copies of the Hill Creek document. Should I foist one on Faye and then let other people know?
Yeah, you could.
I can give it to you
Just
electronically,
leave them up here and we'll hand them out.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. So with that, I'm going to recess the board meeting and call back into session the joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners. And we were in the middle of item 4A, I believe it is, and the ordinance number 1505, and we had gone through the first two possible amendments to the ordinance. So I think we're on the third one, which really only has one option.
I think, Mr. Chair, I would move that we include that because it's the recommendation of our legal counsel that correction be made to the ordinance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt this. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. So just to understand this proposed amendment, it would delete the words "and community," and Mr. Dingle, your office was referenced as being the origin of that. What is the reason that this language was included in the first place, and why would it be needed to be deleted?
I don't know why it was included. I presume it's because from what I heard of the conversation, the first public hearing on this was to provide, I think it was general community education about the hazards of smoking. Is that right, Ms. Gaffney? I'm trying to remember what the...
Originally, Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, this language came from model ordinances that were adopted in other communities as an opportunity, yes, to have an allowable use for the revenue from that license fee. So that's...
It seems like the focus was on how a fee that's trying to educate people about the program, both the retailers and the public about the program, would not run afoul of an idea of a tax. But what would run afoul of an idea of a tax is to educate the retailers about the program, but to allow other money to educate the public about the evils of tobacco and not educate them about the tobacco registration program. So I was trying to, dig into that corner of it, because it seems like we'd want to educate not only the tobacco retailers, but also the parents, the children, and other people and health professionals, nurses, doctors, on the importance of this program as distinct from trying to duplicate or use the tiny amount of money for some sort of outreach on the general topic of the evils of tobacco. And I just wanted to make it clear that it seems like the word community, taking it out, means that we're only going to be
educating the retailers and not anyone else. And I was wondering why we want to narrow the use of the funds to only help the retailers understand what the program is, as opposed to the other people that are affected by this, that would be including other people. Why do we want to just delete the funding for those other people that we would want to know that this program exists?
I didn't understand that the money was going to be used that way. The question was, that I was specifically asked to answer is, could you impose a fee and use it for general education purposes about the evils of smoking? And the answer to that is very clear under Oregon law. No, that is a tax. All of the money that's collected from this has to go directly to the regulation itself. That would include, of course, doing pamphlets for retailers, this is how you comply, those sorts of things. But I did not understand that's what the money was being used for. It was going to just be smoking is bad, you shouldn't smoke, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but what I'm pointing out is that by deleting the words "and community," it seems like the only people that are going to be provided with any information or any education will be the retailers, not other people. And I realize that what we had said before in enacting this, and I certainly was in favor of including the words "and community," but what I'm now trying to zero in on is the fact that if this is a new program, one that doesn't exist anywhere else in the state, cities apparently can't even enact this ordinance because of the power of the county as a public health agency to enact this ordinance. This is a precursor perhaps to an ordinance that would apply to all tobacco retailers. And if we do that in this ordinance and we delete the opportunity to use those fees, and I realize the testimony has been it's tiny, right? It's a tiny amount of money that's going to be left over after the retailers are educated about it. But my point is that there's other people that need to know about it. And apparently this amendment would delete that opportunity.
The way that it was written was general and generic, community education. If you wanted to amend it to read, and community education regarding the ordinance, that would be permissible.
Yeah, that might achieve the purpose of keeping it within the realm of a fee, but also achieve the goal of making sure that the people that need to be educated about the ordinance would in fact be able to be informed about it.
Because as written, it was general, and if anyone went back and looked at what was said at the time that it was proposed and the explanation that was offered, that it was not limited to just the ordinance, it was general education about tobacco.
Maybe the words "and others" about the program, so tobacco retailer and others about the program.
I think that it's not. I don't think the word "community" is the problem. It's making it specific that it's clear that the education program is related to the ordinance and not just general education of the community about tobacco.
Right.
Right. And that was exactly the issue I brought up in December when I tried to remove the words "and community" at that time. And the argument that was made against that at that time is, why would anybody be against educating people about the evils of tobacco? And I believe that was made by Commissioner Sorensen. So it was, at least at that time, the interpretation of "and community education" was general education about tobacco. So that's one of the reasons why I asked the question back then, was I felt we were crossing a line about the preemption of local taxation of tobacco. And I think we just need to clarify that, education is related to the ordinance. Whether we do that by removing the words "and community" or we add some additional words, it just has to be about the ordinance and related to the ordinance, because otherwise it would be considered a tax.
And to clarify, it doesn't have anything to do specifically, the general rule that is not limited to tobacco. It's broader than that. Anytime you impose a regulatory fee, it needs to be limited to things associated with the fee, not.
Yeah.
something that benefits the general public, because that is a tax.
Although there are other things we're allowed to have general taxation on under state law. This specifically, we're not allowed to have any taxation. Commissioner Storm.
And just to follow up then, on this, we kind of discussed the possibility of having this ordinance apply outside of cities the way it is now. And I just wanted to get a better sense of you. Over the years, we've had different legal opinions on this topic of whether our health authority does extend throughout the county, or whether there are limits on our health authority within the incorporated areas and not. And I think that we kind of started this whole thing, this border discussion, in part because of the fact that the board chose to have this ordinance apply only outside of cities, and now because of the perceived unfairness of this fee applying only to stores outside of cities. Could a city enact this ordinance and use the power that they have to enact this ordinance? I mean, our health staff has been going around to cities asking them what they think of having this ordinance apply to them. Could they, in fact, initiate the effort themselves rather than simply consenting or asking us to pass an ordinance to encompass their community?
Well, my recollection is that the cities were going to be presented with both options.
So they might do one, they might do the other.
Right. I think they were given the choice of doing their own or adopting the ordinance that the county did, incorporating it.
Yeah.
I think in answer to your question about conflicting opinions, at least the things that I've seen, it really depends on what the question being posed is.
Of course.
In other words, what the issue is.
Yeah.
And at what time, too, at what time period, because the statutes, as Commissioner Bozovich has pointed out, have changed over time with regard to public health.
Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Commissioner Sorensen in dissent. So I move on to item 4 of the possible amendments, and this is the fines and penalties. Commissioner Stewart.
Once again, I'll lead off here with my thought process was more in line with what I heard from the grocers that I spoke with, was that our current process of penalties was difficult for them to deal with. That why didn't we do something that resembled the OLCC fine process? Number one. And the second that I heard is why is there no penalty for the clerk, just the store owner? So I would propose that we consider both option 4, B, and C, unless there is a penalty for the clerk under 4B.
Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Stewart, the penalty for clerks selling exists in ORS. So option 4C here would make that reference in your code. So it doesn't create a new penalty, but it references it in Lane code. And I'm sorry, I missed your question about option 4A.
Well, I was just curious as to, well, up here it says 4B is the close is the OLCC option to kind of follow it. So does the Oregon Liquor Commission have a penalty for the clerk if they, I don't want to duplicate.
Right.
If we're going to follow OLCC and try to revise our penalties to mirror theirs, do they already have a penalty for the clerk, and is adding C a redundant option?
No. If you wanted to most closely mirror OLCC, you could actually adopt all three of these. Option 4A looks at the look-back period. So your current ordinance has a look-back period of 5 years. So any violation in the last 5 years gets counted toward how severe the penalty is. OLCC has a look-back period of 2 years. So So the proposed amendments in front of you have a proposed look-back of 3 years. So that's option 4A would shorten the look-back period from 5 years to 3 years. And then 4B, there's a chart on page 7 of your packet that kind of compares the current requirements to the amended requirements based on the number of violations in whatever that look-back period is that you determine. And so the amended requirement brings those more closely in alignment with what OLCC does.
I guess in closing, I would have preferred that we just follow. Is there some specific reason why we just didn't follow the same penalty program as OLCC, selling to minors? I mean, long-term cigarettes, there's a highly likelihood that long-term, if you use it, it's going to kill you. You know, liquor, it seems to me like it's a short-term use, and, you know, short-term use can lead to car accidents and death fairly immediately. And, you know, OLCC and the state has determined that that's the appropriate fines. Why can't we, or why is there this great resistance from trying to keep everything uniform so that if I own a store, I know what the penalties are going to be. They're uniform. I don't have, oh, well, if I sell this product, this is the penalty. If I sell this product, this is the penalty. Why can't we try to make it simple?
Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Stewart, you absolutely could do that if you shortened the look-back period to 2 years. That would make it the same as OLCC's, and so that would bring that into alignment. And then the fines and suspensions listed in 4B would bring you in alignment with what OLCC does. So you absolutely can do that, and we're happy to bring that back to you. In terms of the staff recommendation on going to 3 years instead of 2 was merely based on what we know about strong ordinances and trying to have the fines and penalties be strong. But that is totally your call on where you want to set those.
Okay. I'll listen to the comments of my colleagues.
I'm going to insert myself into the queue here, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner Sorensen. My understanding is OLCC does not have, under the first offense, any suspension. Is that accurate? I was trying to look it up online here.
And, you know, certainly County Council can maybe look over my shoulder, Chair Bozovich. I have the OLCC exhibits.
I'm just looking at the tables in your thing. I don't have the ORS in front of me, or the OARs.
So when I looked for the category of failing to sell, I believe it's on the next page to find that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand their table. It has like category 1. You know,
right,
versus...
I believe we're in category 3 when I looked at that, but again, I'll defer to County Council.
Yes. So it's category 3. It's the 4th or 5th. There's 2 different ones. Knowingly sold, made alcohol available to a minor, failed to verify age. And so that would be a category 3. And
so it is. They do start with 10 days. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it does have for that type of
10 days, or it's not and. Okay, or. So they could choose to fine versus actually suspend.
Right. It's
okay.
Available.
I knew that there was, and I guess you get out to the 5th, and it is an automatic suspension because there's an and in there. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that we weren't. One of the concerns that was raised by retailers was you have a disgruntled clerk, they get your tobacco sales suspended for any period of time, and for some of these stores, that's their major profit driver and what keeps them able to write their paychecks from week to week. So any suspension at all is almost a death sentence to some of these stores is what they were concerned about. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't going straight to a suspension, that if we do make this change and adopt 4B, that it would allow for, it has the word or. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I was clear about that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Commissioner
Chair, I
Sorensen.
think just to be clear, if you adopted that, the third, under the OLCC regulations, the third violation within 2 years is a mandatory 30-day suspension. That's when you would see the, where the stores are closed up and they lock the cooler and all that.
Right. Which that's fine. If you've gotten to the third, you have a problem.
Yeah.
Other than just a disgruntled clerk. So. Commissioner Sorensen.
Is there currently any penalty for clerks violating the ordinance in the current ordinance?
As I understand it, Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, that violation is in ORS, so it's not in your current version of the ordinance.
Okay.
It isn't listed.
All right. And then regarding the word shorten, as you've used that term in 4A, and the word revise, as you've used that term in 4B, is it fair to say that in the shorten, it's 2 years versus 5 years?
Chair Bozovich,
To look back?
Commissioner Sorensen, the language that's in the draft in front of you takes it from 5 years to 3 years.
5 to 3.
Right. OLCC has a 2-year look back, so if you wanted 2 years, we would bring that back.
Oh,
in the next
it's shortened from 5 to 3, or another way to look at it is we already have 5, and it's changing it and making the look-back period 3.
That would be correct.
Okay. And regarding the revised fines, does that mean that they will be lower?
Actually, Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, some of the OLCC fines are higher than what was in your original ordinance. So
Okay.
that's why I use the word revised.
Revised, because some were higher and some were lower?
Right. So
And overall, would you give an opinion that the proposal to revise it would be more onerous on the store owners, or is it making it easier on the store owners? Or is there such a thing as to describe it that way?
Did you want to answer that, or?
Not being a store owner, I
Yeah.
don't think I could answer
Yeah.
whether it's easier.
They want it, though. They want to do this.
Oh, this language was suggested by several of the retailers
Yeah.
we spoke with.
Okay. And are you guys recommending these changes? What's the reason you had your own plan for the penalties for violators? Are you wedded to your version of how the fine should be administered and the length of the period that you look at?
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I've been in public service my entire career, and I'm really clear it is your call as the policymakers. I'm not wedded to any of this.
But I mean, you're not recommending this, but on the other hand, the fact that you came up with your own schedule and the board approved it,
The initial schedule that we brought to you was based on ordinances that had been approved in other communities, so that was the genesis of that
Okay.
original
All right.
language that we lifted. And again, with an eye toward making sure that there was sufficient teeth in the ordinance to really deter people from violating. So
Mhm.
that was the factoring that went into.
does the current state law deter people appropriately, do you think? Do you think ours actually, in the way it's currently written, even though we haven't had to implement it and we haven't fined anybody, is ours better? Or?
My public health opinion is that any of these scenarios would be much better than what currently exists in state law.
Why is that?
Having a tobacco retail license program
Mhm.
is an effective deterrent to sales to youth. So I would say, yes, any of these changes, as long as we kept the ordinance, that would be
Okay,
better than current state law.
very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Gaffney. You know, I've spent a lot of my adult life in retail, and with the Tillamook Farmers Co-op, and with Jerry's Home Improvement Center, and with Gray's Garden Center. And really, what makes it easier or harder is just kind of more uniformity in the rules that you have to know and the rules you have to adhere to. And so that being the question, the only thing that makes it easier or harder on this is 3 years or 2 years. Because if it's 2 years, it's the same as OLCC. If it's 3 years, that's a slight difference in the ordinance. So I'd be more inclined to go with a 2-year look-back period rather than a 3-year look-back period. That doesn't have anything to do with the motion, because you're just saying shorten the look-back period and then suspend schedule to be more closely resembling OLCC. So when you come back, I'd suggest 2 years to make it more resembling OLCC. That's just my own observation based upon making it easier to understand the rules, so you don't have 2 sets of books that you need to look at, even though it's one tiny little change, not tiny little difference.
So we haven't had a motion yet.
Before anybody makes a motion, I just want to make sure that I think the simple way to look at this is if 4A was amended to 2 years and all A, B, and C were adopted, it would mirror the OLCC.
Correct.
Does that make it really clear to folks?
Yes. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be real quick. Thank you very much. I was actually gonna suggest that, so you beat me to it. I've dealt with the OLCC a lot in my former career as a mayor, and so I think as long as we use this as our guideline, I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't expect a lot of fights to be breaking out, buying cigarettes as you would with alcohol, and so I think though. From this perspective, I think it's a good guideline to have. And I know when we used to deal with some of the interesting businesses in downtown Springfield, one of the things we finally came up with regarding OLCC was call for service. And that's actually how we got OLCC to finally come in and do enforcement. And there was a certain block in downtown Springfield that was a lot more call for service when it came to police than any other block. And it was interesting. Not too many strip clubs in downtown Springfield anymore. So, so I think these guidelines are really appropriate. So thank you for that.
So does somebody wish to make a motion?
Mr. Stewart, I would move that we the fines and penalties portion of the code, amend it to reflect option 4A with a 2-year look-back period, including option 4B and 4C.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. So that walks us through the 4 amendments, and I originally had the thought of proposing an age change amendment, but because there hasn't been support and most of these changes have been about border issues for a countywide ordinance, I'm not going to push forward my amendment relative to raising the age of purchase to 21. Because I think we'd be faced with the same issues about just going into Springfield and purchasing there. So if we're not willing to move to a countywide ordinance at this time, I'll just hold back on increasing the age of purchase and possession. Although I do believe that's an extremely effective way of dealing with youth tobacco and other nicotine product use. That's one of the reasons why we have an alcohol limit at 21 and why the new marijuana legislation is 21. We understand that 18 to 20-year-olds have a tendency to be really close friends with people that are minors and maybe not having the best judgment in the world. I don't understand why we let them enlist at 18. It's something I would have gone there, but I think I will not go there today for the sake of the fact that we decided not to go to a broad countywide ordinance in our earlier discussion. So with that, is there somebody that wishes to make a motion relative to approving our second reading as we have gone through our 4 amendments and setting a third reading and public hearing for August, and I had it written down, August 4th is the next meeting. We have a down week in there and we need to have the 13 days, so August 4th would be the public hearing. So, Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I would move the second reading of ordinance 15-05 setting a third reading and public hearing for ordinance 1505 as amended, reflecting the motions that were made today for setting the public hearing for August the 4th, 2015 in Harris Hall.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and set the third reading and public hearing. Is there any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. When it comes time to request for the agenda committee later on today, presuming it'll be today, I'm going to be requesting that we take a look at a countywide ordinance and take a look at the steps involved in involving the cities in us passing a countywide tobacco ordinance that would essentially take it back to the ordinance that we had originally, the ordinance that we currently have, that we're planning to discuss amendments of. So. A couple of commissioners have talked about coordinating with cities, giving cities full advance notice, and trying to have cities work in conjunction with the Board of Health in such an ordinance. And that's the request I'll be making later on today.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorensen.
I think that some of the public testimony on the issue of whether this should be applied inside of cities and not just in unincorporated areas, and I think that one of the things that we might consider either today or after the next public hearing is the idea that there is sufficient interest on the part of the board to extend this ordinance to all of Lane County and not just to the unincorporated areas, and that the testimony about the border issues, which I know will arise in the future regarding stores that are near county borders as opposed to near city borders within a county, but it seems like the board is interested in having a discussion of extending it, and I know that up until now there's been a kind of an effort to educate the cities and the city councilors, mayors, city managers about the importance of it. But as we all know, this is a very difficult issue. The tobacco industry pours millions of dollars into political campaigns each year. They spend millions of dollars on lobbying and advertising, and not every elected official wants to go out and enact an ordinance. And this board has seen fit to do that. And although I'm not in favor of chipping away at it, I think it's good that we've got this ordinance. So I think that depending on the public testimony at the hearing on the ordinance, changing the ordinance, what I might call rolling back the ordinance, and I guess I'll hope that people that testify on it will further educate me about whether or not we are in fact rolling back the ordinance. But to me, right now, it looks like we're rolling back the ordinance in one way, maybe since the discussion has primarily been, what about all these border issues and these stores that are using these coupons, and two doors down the road or quarter mile down the road, competitors, or, we didn't hear a lot of outside the county comments. It was all within the county, which seems to mean if we can achieve our goal of having children not smoking and not getting access, and making it more difficult to purchase cigarettes by means of things like these coupon promotions, if we could accomplish that countywide, that would be a pretty good thing. And for the commissioners that are most concerned about this store unfairness, that issue goes away in large part. So I'm really hoping that the public hearing that we hold on this is going to be more than just yes, no on the continuation of the ordinance, but rather the idea that, well, maybe the cities have had some time to consider this. Maybe they'll come. Maybe they'll say they like it. Maybe a few will, and we might be able to continue the leadership that we've demonstrated here.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I look forward to Commissioner Farr's agenda team request. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the motion? All those in favor of approving the second reading and setting the third reading public hearing for ordinance 15-05, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion Motion passes 4-1. Commissioner Sorensen in dissent. Thank you for your patience in allowing us to jump back to that time certain and taking up part of your lunch. And speaking of that, I think we need to have a little bit of process check, but I am going to first ask if there's any other business for the Board of Health. And if not, then I'm going to adjourn the Board of Health Commissioners joint meeting, and I'm going to call back into order the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners. And we will jump to back to adjustments to the agenda again. We have several items we haven't gotten to yet in our morning session, including about, it looks like 15, 25, 35, 40, 45 minutes worth of agenda items. And we do have time certain public hearings at 1:30 for Public Works, and we need to do an exec session shortly thereafter to accommodate our county council schedule. Excuse me. So do we want to postpone those morning items to the afternoon after the Public Works items and after executive session, or do we want to try and plow through a few more of those now and take a shortened lunch? So I'm looking to the board for their preferences. Yeah, there's not much staff in the room, so I'm thinking,
Why don't we dispense with the consent?
why don't we go ahead and take care of consent calendar, and then we will move the human resources items to the end of the afternoon, although it looks like we have one of
Mary's here.
We have Mary Miller. Maybe we can deal with that item on the self-insurance also. We'll see if we can get a couple of them knocked off.
Chair Bozovich and members of the board, the exec session, we are so jammed up today, I don't have a problem with moving it until next week. I know we're going to do the litigation update.
Other than your contract calls for it to have been like last month.
Yeah,
so
said it was supposed to actually happen in January, but
yeah.
So, but I just know you're really jammed up. That's all I was trying to find.
Okay, I appreciate that. If it turns out that that's what the board chooses to do, I loathe having to push your annual review back even further from when it was supposed to have happened.
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval of the consent calendar.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. So with that, we'll move on to item 6A, which is public hearing and second reading on ordinance 1504 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to establish a health plan self-insurance sub-fund. And we have Mary Miller here. So,
hi, thank you for having me back. Today we are doing the second reading and request for public hearing for the establishment of a sub-fund to the benefit fund to establish self-insurance funding for the employee health and retiree health plan, which goes off self-insured effective August 1st.
any questions for staff? With that, then I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up for the public hearing? Is there anyone that wishes to address the board concerning ordinance 1504? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stewart.
I would move approval of ordinance 15-04 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to establish a health plan self-insurance sub-fund.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, this is an ordinance. Will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Sorensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Lyken?
Aye.
Commissioner Farr?
Aye.
Commissioner Bozovich?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. It is getting to be lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank
Miller.
you.
So do we want to take on the Order 1507-1410 in the matter of establishing new salary ranges for physician-based classifications of physicians, psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, and program manager? I believe we probably can. Seeing Ms. Edwards is in the audience, if she can come forward, I think we can deal with that real quickly before lunch also. I apologize for jumping into everybody's lunch hour, and I'm glad that our staff from H&HS didn't depart quickly. So I'll turn this over to Ms. Edwards and Ms. Cavney.
Okay, so today we're here to talk about establishing new salary ranges for, as you had stated, Chair Bozovich, for our physicians, psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, and program manager positions. We currently have 6 vacant physician positions, 3 vacant psychiatrist positions, and 1 vacant physician program manager position, and some of which have been vacant for more than a year. So what we're finding is that even through our best recruitment efforts, even through using outside sources, we've been unable to recruit the candidates that we need for these positions. So we are bringing those new salary ranges forward for your consideration.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, as Karen knows, this has been a big issue for me since I came on the board, and I think part of it is because it has been challenging to compete. I actually really looked into this, and we're well within line, I think, of other public entities, and I think it puts us in a pretty good position to compete with the private sector, because the thing that we can offer is they are able to offer signing bonuses where public sector we can't. So I think just based on that, I really appreciate the work you did here. I mean, if you're going to have what I would call the healthcare professionals that come to work for us, and we are the public health authority, I believe these salaries are well in line, and I would offer any of my colleagues to take a look at, what they're offering in the private sector, and you'll find this puts us in a better competitive mode, even though, again, when private sector are able to offer the signing bonuses, that takes us out of it. But I think the salary as a whole keeps us there, so I really appreciate the due diligence here and the work. I'm supportive because I believe this is what we're up against. And as you mentioned, some of these positions have not been filled for over a year. And so I just looking at these ranges, I think it puts us in that position where we can be competitive. So I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Karen, maybe you can explain, being that far down with that many positions open, I guess I understand some of it's new clinics that we're establishing. I'm sure that we don't have patients yet, but knowing that we got this huge patient load, how are we serving these folks without these critical positions?
Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Stewart, that has been a serious challenge. There are some positions that, yes, we're forecasting for new clinics. We have employed locums, so temporary physicians basically who are willing to come into town, and we have to pay a very high premium to contract with those physicians. But we had to have someone to serve our patients, and so we've used some locums. We have had longer wait times for patients to get in to see providers because we just haven't had the staff. So it's a combination of piecing those things together to make it work. At behavioral health, we've been down psychiatry for quite some time, and it means that we can't see new patients. We can't bring people in who really do need to be served.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was trying to think in my mind, okay, so it's overtime, but, our clinics probably aren't staying open any longer. So it's really, I appreciate the fact that you explain we're bringing folks in at a higher rate, and then also we're just pushing out appointments.
And I guess the one thing I would add, too, is I just want to acknowledge the staff who we do have who have been working very hard to try and cover the gaps as well as they can, because there is a huge demand from the community for our services, and I think our doctors and our nurse practitioners really want to be able to meet that demand. So I want to publicly appreciate their efforts to continue to do everything they can.
Yeah, and one final comment is the huge demand is if my memory is correct, we're seeing approximately 100,000 people. Is that right? Within our system.
Right.
So
yeah.
A third of the population's relying on this. So thanks.
So these positions in particular, most of what they do is a reimbursed service, isn't it?
Yes, so the revenue that we would use to pay these providers comes from billing for the services they provide.
Right, to the Oregon Health Plan or under the Affordable Care Act. So one of the things just so the public understands is these positions are actually revenue generating positions. If we don't have them filled and they stay unfilled and we're hiring outside temp help or whatever and we fail to continue to fill them and we can't keep the temp up, we actually lose the revenue because we're not billing for the service. So it's one of those things where we're in sort of a catch-22. And I think, we talked a lot this morning about our community health improvement plan. One of the big things was expanding access to care. Mm-hmm. And if we can't fill the primary care providers, and particularly one of the real issues for me is our lack of mental health provision in Lane County. And a lot of what we can't fill right now are psychiatrists. That's a real issue for us. So not only is it a reimbursed service, but our lack of having those filled hurts our ability to provide access to care, and it also hurts our ability to help folks with mental health issues, which deals with the incoming door in our public safety system, and also even people that become destabilized and ultimately end up homeless. If we can get early intervention, this is so important in so many ways. People might look at this and only see the number, and that the county's paying up to this huge salary for people, that they think of, but it's a reimbursed, position, and it's so critical to that access to care. And if we can provide that medical and mental health care early on to these folks, where they don't end up losing a job or going into crisis and becoming homeless, there's so many other services that it prevents the cost of down the road. So I'm fully in support, and I appreciate what staff's done to come forward with this. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And in talking about the CHIP, providing strategy 2 on the CHIP is improved access to health care, but really providing more physicians and PAs and behavioral health specialists. It really addresses all 5 of our goals in the CHIP. Other people have said everything that needs to be said regarding where the money is going to come from, but significantly in the state of Oregon, we have greater than 90% of all Oregonians are covered by a health plan of some form at this point in time, and the functional zero on that doesn't get us to 100% by any means. So I think we're suffering from our success in insuring Oregonians, and it's a very healthy place to be. The fact that almost all Oregonians are covered by a health plan, and by taking this step, we're improving the access of the Oregonians who do have the health plan. So this is a big step. Today we've really looked at our CHIP in a lot of different ways, and we've stood behind the actions that we took in 2013 in implementing the CHIP. Thank you.
So do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, the motion guy, I guess.
Yeah, Commissioner Stewart.
I'll move approval of Order 15-7-14-10 on the matter of establishing new salary ranges for the physician-based classification of physician, psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, and program manager.
Second. I'll just refer to you as Commissioner Motion Guy and you as Commissioner Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see our auditor in the audience, and we have one other item that would be great to deal with this morning, and we'll deal with all the announcements and other stuff this afternoon. If you all don't mind, I'll go to item 8C, which is in the matter of appointing Dennis Hidgmans to the Temporary Internal Audit Committee. It's Order 1507-1411, and we have Shonda Miller. Ms. Miller.
Yes, hello, Commissioner Bozovich, the rest of the commissioners. So this is a pretty straightforward motion. We have a vacancy on the Temporary Internal Audit Committee for a Citizen Budget Committee member. So this motion is to appoint Dennis Hidgmans to the temporary internal audit committee.
Any questions for, is there a motion? Commissioner Farr.
Chair, I move
Oh, we broke the
Order
cycle.
1507, 1411, appointing Dennis Sidgmans to the temporary internal.
Second.
If I might,
Commissioner Stern.
I wanted to say thank you to Commissioner Farr for, I was copied on his personal outreach to all the members of the Budget Committee to see who was wanting to serve, and I noticed that there was 2 willing, and thankful for your diligence in trying to get somebody to fill the position and be a contributor, so thank you.
And I will respond. We did go through a process, and Ms. Miller and I moved through the process with the assistance of the board and the responses from the board, and we will have more reports as this committee moves forward. Thank you.
Yes.
Further discussion in the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So with that, I am going to recess the Board of Commissioners, and we will come back into regular session at 1:30.